All right, we need everybody to get settled in. Make sure your cell phones are turned off. It's a little early in the morning after everything we've been doing, huh? I don't want to hear any whining, though. I was in here till midnight working, so I got 5 hours sleep. All right, and I was at breakfast. Okay. Don't clap. I'm not happy about it. Breakfast should be had like normal at 11, 11:30, you know, while everybody else is eating lunch. Okay. So this is going to be the first of our Torah studies, our Deuteronomy readings. We're going to do this for 5 days, not all in a row because we do have free day. So we got 5 days of reading the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. This is day 1. And we're going to cover the first 7 chapters. Wow, yeah, it's going to be great. Now, for those of you that are familiar with this, you can go to sleep for the next few minutes. No, pay attention anyway because you might not remember how we do things. So let me explain sort of how this works. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a couple of quick announcements just to make sure that everybody knows what's going on today. We have a few things that came up that we need to just share with you that we're adding into the mix, like a group photo. We'd like to do that today after lunch, okay? Okay, so today after lunch, because we were going to do it later in the week, but we know it's going to rain tomorrow. I think we're going to be good for the mikveh today, all right? And I will have here directions for the mikveh. So I'm not sure exactly where the picture is going to take place. If you have an MTOI shirt, we would like you to wear it for the picture. Okay, it'll be after lunch, so we're going to try to meet here right after lunch, and before we actually open up the marketplace and do everything else planned for this afternoon, we'll go from here. There's an outdoor amphitheater I think we're going to use and see if we can get everybody seated in that and take a group picture in that or something like that, okay? So this is our plan at the moment. Let's see if there's anything else. And don't forget, so this afternoon we've got our beginnings of our activities. So we start off with the marketplace will be open right after the picture taking. We're going to try to do that, the picture somewhere around between 1 and 1:30 because lunch is from 12 to 1. So I know a lot of you get really comfortable in your seats at the meals. I saw a bunch of you, actually I didn't see a bunch of you because you're still over there. The ones that I don't see who are still sitting over there. Spread the word. We have to not get glued to our chairs at the meals because we have lots of stuff happening, okay? Now, I try to leave just in time to get over here and then make a quick little walk around and remind everybody, hey, we're starting the next thing at, and then everybody goes, yeah, and they go back to drinking their coffee and talking. Okay. They don't have to be here. It's okay. They can miss out. You can go back and tell them what they missed and say, oh, you missed some good stuff. You know, it's not just about discussing the word, reading the word, hearing the word. This is what's commanded actually in Deuteronomy, that we should be coming together to hear this read. Okay? And we're going to read that verse at some point later in the week as we get to that part of Deuteronomy. It's in the later chapters. Okay? So this afternoon, after that, we're going to have, for those who are doing the redeeming of the firstborn, we're going to do the Pidyon Haben here in this room. And then from here, we'll be going over to the place we're doing the mikveh. I do have directions, and I am going to print out copies, and I'll have them for you after lunch. Okay? But we're going to be leaving from here, so you won't need the directions and the address and everything until we get here after lunch anyway. All right, so we'll have that. So let's all meet here as quickly as we can after lunch so that we can get that done and go get the picture taken. And then we'll come back here, handle some marketplace stuff and Pidyon Haben, and then go off and do the mikveh. Okay. The water, I promise you, will be very cold. The air should be around mid-60s, 65, 67. So it won't be terrible in the air, but it'll be, the water, I promise you, will be very cold. Again, appropriate footwear and clothing to match. I'm not sure the setup there for changing, but I think there's a place there, but you're only going to be a few minutes from here. So as long as you have a way to dry yourself off and then get back here, you can always change here. It's only 10, 15 minutes from here. It's not very far, 15 minutes maybe. Okay? All right. That's going to cover it for the afternoon. Then after supper, of course, we're going to go right from having Deuteronomy in the morning to having our Torah study tonight. Okay, yeah. Okay? So as appropriate, we're going to spend a lot of time in the Word today. Okay, that's really good. As a matter of fact, I'd rather just do that all day. Okay, and we could, look, it's funny, the scripture readings that we're doing all morning, and some people might have looked at that and go, what are you going to do for 3 hours all morning? Actually, we're rushing it to start because normally we would start at 9:30 or almost 10 o'clock, but because we have more time, lunch would be at 1 or later. But now we have a 12 o'clock sort of hard stop on when lunch starts. But we used to do this and we only blocked out a half an hour at first, or it was an hour. Then we realized that everybody wanted to talk so much about the scripture that we just kept making it longer and longer until it took up the whole morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to read these 7 chapters. I want you to hopefully have a pen and paper or something to take notes, because you may, as we're reading the 7 chapters, realize that there's a verse you want to ask a question about, or there's a verse you want to make a comment about. And then after we finish reading the chapters, we're going to have a Midrash. We'll discuss those things that we read. We'll have a discussion. All right, now if you want to read, we have chairs up here on the stage. You see they're full already with some people, which is good. Wait, hold on. Let me just make sure I know how many people I need for today. I need 13. What do I have up there? 8? I've got 9. Okay, so I'm going to need 4 more people at some point. If you would like to read, but you are not going to be able to navigate the staircase, okay, we'll be able to come up here, do it at this microphone here, and we'll have you up front. Okay, so if you do want to read, I would like to put those people that need to have me down there to do it to either go first or last, because that way I don't have to come back and forth off the stage. Okay, and the reason that is about up and down is because I do recite a blessing over each person before they read. That's a tradition to do. And so that's why we were originally going to have the readers down there, but then I wanted them up here so they can come up and we can say the blessing. Okay? So just let us know if you do want to read, but you can't get up on the stage and we'll work something out for you. All right, so I think that's going to cover it for there. So everybody open up to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Deuteronomy chapter 1. And I do have a large print scriptures up here as well. If you want to read out of your scriptures, that is fine. Okay? And you can bring that up with you. Otherwise, you can read out of this one. I actually decided I do want to read you a verse real quickly. So give me a second. So, in Deuteronomy chapter 31, in verse 10, it says, And Moses commanded, saying, At the end of 7 years, at the appointed time, the year of release, at Sukkot, when all Israel comes to appear before Yahweh your Elohim, in the place he chooses, read this Torah before all Israel in their hearing. Assemble the people, the men, the women, the little ones, and your sojourners within your gates, so that they hear and so that they learn to fear Yahweh your Elohim and guard to do all the words of this Torah. And so we don't know when the Jubilee is. I know some people think they do. They don't. Okay? We don't know. We don't know when the Jubilee is. We don't know when the Shemitah 7-year cycle ends. So we're reading it every year. It certainly doesn't hurt, and it definitely gets us within that parameter, so it's a good thing to do. Okay, so that's sort of the motivator to why I started doing this every year many years ago. 20 years ago, we started doing this way. Okay? And so, because that verse, I said, well, why don't we just do that? Let's get together and read that word. And then how can we do it? We'll do it as a nice midrash. We'll read it together. And by the way, there's a real blessing, and I don't care how well you read or how poorly you read. If any of you have listened, and all of you I know have listened to my teachings, I butcher scripture every week. In other words, I'm talking too fast and I trip over the words. That's what I mean by butcher. I don't mean misinterpret, but I mean as far as reading. So if you're afraid you're going to read and stumble or say something wrong or mispronounce something, I do that every week. So nobody should be worried about that. Because my brain is going faster than my tongue, and my tongue goes pretty quick. But my brain's going even quicker, and so I trip over the words. Okay, so don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. Don't have any issues with that. You'll be just fine, okay? All right, Rabbi Tom, you're going to want to read today. Okay, I'm going to have you go last, and I'll come down and finish with you, okay? All right. Okay, so we read Deuteronomy 31 just to do that. Okay. So when I call you up, we're going to have a handheld mic for this because I don't want to have to constantly adjust the height of the microphone stand. We did that one time where I constantly had to raise and lower. So for those of you that are reading, This microphone is very directional. This isn't going to work as good as aiming it right at your mouth, okay? So don't hold it like an ice cream cone that doesn't quite do it. Hold it like you did as a little kid when you spilled the ice cream. Kaboof, okay? And put it near your mouth. All right, that's going to work out. Now, I mean, some people have big voices, loud voices like I do, but others who don't, they're going to need it right up here. Okay? Awesome. Okay, so I'll call you up when you are to read. Hopefully I'll remember everybody's name. If I don't, please don't be upset with me for not remembering your name. Just tell me when you get up here, and we'll go ahead and recite a blessing, and I will tell you what verses to read from and to, okay? All right, here we go. We'll begin with Sam. Come on up. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sam, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Sam, go ahead and get us started and read verses 1 through 18.
These are the words which Moshe spoke to all Israel beyond the Yarden in the wilderness, in the desert plain opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel and Lavan and Chatzeroth and Dizahav. 11 days' journey from Chorev by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. And it came to be in the 40th year, in the 11th new moon, on the first day of the new moon, that Moshe spoke to the children of Israel according to all that Yah had commanded him concerning them. After he had stricken Sichon, sovereign of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, sovereign of Bashan, who dwelt at Ashtaroth in Edrei. Beyond the Yarden, in the land of Moab, Moshe undertook to declare this Torah, saying, Yah our Elohim spoke to us in Chorev, saying, You have dwelt long enough at this mountain. Turn and set out on your way, and go into the mountains of the Amorites, and to all the neighboring places in the desert plain, in the mountains and in the low country, and in the Negev and on the seacoast, to the land of the Canaanites and to Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. See, I have set the land before you. Go in and possess the land which Yah swore to your fathers, to Avraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov, to give to them and their seed after them. And I spoke to you at that time, saying, I am unable to bear you by myself. Yah, your Elohim, has increased you, and see, you are today as numerous as the stars of the heavens. Yah, Elohim of your fathers, is going to add to you 1,000 times more than you are, and bless you as he has spoken to you. How do I bear your pressure and your burden and your strife by myself? Choose men, wise and understanding, and known to your tribes, and let me appoint them as your heads. And you answered me and said, The word which you have spoken to us to do is good. And I took the heads of your tribes, wise men and known, and made them heads over you, leaders of thousands, and leaders of hundreds, and leaders of 50s, and leaders of 10s, and officers for your tribes. And I commanded your judges at that time, saying, When hearing between your brothers, judge righteously between a man and his brother, or the stranger who is with him. Do not show partiality in right ruling. Hear the small as well as the great. Do not be afraid of anyone's face, for the right ruling belongs to Elohim. And the case which is too hard for you, bring it to me, and I shall hear it. And I commanded you at that time all the words which you should do.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Sam. Okay, next up, Ollie. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Ollie, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Ollie's going to take us from verse 19 to 36.
Then we set out from Horeb, and went through all that great and awesome wilderness which you saw on the way to the mountains of the Amorites, as Yahweh our Elohim had commanded us, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. And I said to you, You have come to the mountains of the Amorim, which Yahweh our Elohim is giving us. See, Yahweh your Elohim has set the land before you. Go up and possess it, as Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you. Do not fear nor be discouraged. And all of you came near to me and said, Let us send men before us, and let them search out the land for us, and bring back word to us of the way by which we should go up, and of the cities into which we would come. And the matter was good in my eyes. So I took 12 of your men, 1 man from each tribe, and they turned and went up into the mountains and came to the Wadi Eshcol and spied it out. And they took some of the fruit of the land in their hands and brought it down to us. And they brought back word to us, saying, The land which Yahweh our Elohim is giving us is good. But you would not go up and rebelled against the mouth of Yahweh your Elohim, and grumbled in your tents, and said, Because Yahweh was hating us, he has brought us out of the land of Mitzrayim to give us into the hand of the Amorim, to destroy us. Where are we going to? Our brothers have made our hearts melt, saying, The people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to the heavens. And we saw the sons of the Anakim there too. Then I said to you, Have no dread or fear of them. Yahweh your Elohim, who is going before you, he does fight for you according to all he did for you in Mitzrayim, before your eyes. And in the wilderness, where you saw how Yahweh your Elohim has borne you, as a man bears his son, in all the way that you went until you came to this place. Yet in this matter you are putting no trust in Yahweh your Elohim, who is going before you in the way to seek out a place for you, to pitch your tents, to show you the way you should go, in fire by night and in a cloud by day. And Yahweh heard the voice of your words and was wroth, and took an oath, saying, Not one of these men of this evil generation shall see that good land of which I swore to give to your fathers, except for Caleb, son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him and his children I give the land on which he walked, because he followed Yahweh completely.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Ollie. Okay, next up, Reno. Okay, yours is challenging. You're going to cross a chapter barrier. Okay. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Reno, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us from verse 37 of chapter 1 to verse 7 of chapter 2.
And Yah was enraged with me for your sakes, saying, You do not go in there either. Yehoshua, the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall go in there. Strengthen him, for he shall cause Yisrael to inherit. And your little ones and your children, who you say are for a prey, who today have no knowledge of good and evil, they are going in there, and to them I give it, and they are to possess it. But you turn and take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the sea of reeds. Then you answered and said to me, We have sinned against Yah. We ourselves are going up, and we shall fight, as Yah our Elohim commanded us. And when each of you had girded on his battle gear, you were ready to go up into the mountain. And Yah said to me, Say to them, Do not go up nor fight, for I am not in your midst, lest you be smitten before your enemies. So I spoke to you, but you would not listen, and rebelled against the mouth of Yah, and acted proudly, and went up into the mountain. Then the Amorites who dwelt in the mountain came out against you, and chased you as bees do, and drove you back from Seir Harmoth. And you returned and wept before Yah. But Yah would not listen to your voice, nor give ear to you. So you dwelt in Kadesh many days, according to the days that you dwelt. Then we turned and set out into the wilderness, the way of the sea of reeds, as Yah spoke to me. And we went round Mount Seir many days, and Yah spoke to me, saying, You have gone around this mountain long enough. Turn northward, and commanded the people, saying, You are about to pass over into the border of your brothers, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, and they are afraid of you, so be on your guard. Do not strive with them, for I do not give you any of their land. No, not so much as a footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. What food you buy from them, with silver you shall eat, and also water you buy from them, with silver you shall drink. For Yah, your Elohim, has blessed you and all the work of your hand. He has known your wandering through this great wilderness. These 40 years, Yah, your Elohim, has been with you. You have not lacked any matter.
Amen. Amen. All right. Next reader. Jason. All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Jason who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Jason's going to take us from now, chapter 2, verse 8 to 25.
And when we passed beyond our brothers, the descendants of Esau, who dwell in Seir, away from the way of the desert plain, away from Elath and Etzon Geber, we turned and passed over by way of the wilderness of Moab. And Yah said to me, Do not distress Moab, nor stir yourself up against them in battle, for I do not give you any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. The Emites had dwelt there formerly, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. They were also reckoned as Rephaites, like the Anakim, but the Moabites called them Emites. And the Horites formerly dwelt in Seir, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed them, and destroyed them from before them, and dwelt in their place, as Israel did to the land of their possession, which Yah gave them. Now rise up and pass over the Wadi Zered. So we passed over the Wadi Zered, and the time we took to come from Kadesh Barneh until we passed over the Wadi Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of battle was consumed from the midst of the camp, as Yah had sworn to them. And also the hand of Yah was against them, to destroy them from the midst of the camp, until they were consumed. And it came to be, when all the men of battle had finally perished from among the people, that Yah spoke to me, saying, This day you are to pass over at Ar, the boundary of Moab. And when you come near the children of Ammon, do not distress them, nor stir yourself up against them. For I do not give you any of the land of the children of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot as a possession. That was also reckoned as a land of Rephaites. Rephaites formerly dwelt there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzumim, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. But Yah destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place, as he had done for the descendants of Esau, who dwelt in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites from before them. They dispossessed them and dwelt in their place, even to this day. And the Awim, who dwelt in villages as far as Azah, the Kaphtorim, who came from Kaphtor, destroyed them and dwelt in their place. Arise, set out and pass over the Wadi Arnon. See, I have given into your hand Shihon the Amorite, sovereign of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to possess it, and stir up yourselves against him. And this day I begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples under all the heavens, who, when they hear the report of you, shall tremble and shake.
Yeah, I don't know what was happening there. The mic was cutting out. Just a little bit there. Okay, try not to hold your hand down around the broadcast part. I don't think that's what you were doing, but there also is a mute button here that you may have been toggling by accident. So let's be careful with that. Okay, come on up. And your name again? Tom. Okay, you have another one of those chapter crossing challenges here. Okay, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Tom, who's come out to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us from chapter 2 and verse 26 to chapter 3 and verse 11. 2:26 to 3:11. Okay?
Then I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon, sovereign of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, "Let me pass over through your land on the highway. I shall go on the highway and turn neither to the right nor to the left. What food you sell me for silver I shall eat, and what water you give me for silver I shall drink. Only let me pass over on foot, as the descendants of Esau who dwell in the Seir and the Moabites who dwell in Ar did for me, until I pass over the Yarden to the land of Yahweh our Elohim is giving us." But Sihon, sovereign of Heshbon, would not let us pass over, for Yahweh your Elohim hardened his spirit and strengthened his heart to give him into your hand, as it is this day. And Yahweh said to me, "See, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to possess, in order to possess his land." And Sihon and his people came out against us to fight at Yahatz. And Yahweh our Elohim gave him over to us. So we smote him and his sons and all his people. And we took all his cities at that time, and we put the men, women, and little ones of every city under the ban. We left none remaining. Only the livestock we took as plunder for ourselves and the spoil of the cities which we captured. As from Eror, which is on the edge of the Wadi Ammon, and the city that is by the Wadi, as far as Gilead, there was not one city too high for us. Yahweh our Elohim gave all to us. Only you did not go near the land of the children of Ammon, anywhere along the Wadi Yabok, or to the cities of the mountains, or wherever Yahweh our Elohim had commanded us. Then we turned and went up the way to Bashan, and the Og, sovereign of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle the Edrei. And Yahweh said to me, "Do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, sovereign of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon." So Yahweh our Elohim also gave into our hands Og, sovereign of Bashan, with all his people, and we smote him until he had no survivors remaining. And we captured all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we did not take from them. 60 cities, all the district of Argob, the reign of Og in Bashan. All these cities were fenced with high walls, gates, and bars, besides a great many unwalled towns. And we put them under the ban, as we did to Sihon, sovereign of Heshbon, putting the men, the women, and the children of every city under the ban. But all the livestock and the spoil of the cities we took as booty for ourselves. And at the time we took the land from the hand of the two sovereigns of the Amorites, that was beyond the Yarden, from the Wadi Arnon to Mount Hermon. Sidonians call Hermon Sirion, and the Amorites call it Sinir. All the cities of the plain, all the Gilead, and all the Bashan, as far as Sakal and Edrei, cities of the reign of Og in Bashan. For only Og, sovereign of Bashan, was left to the remnant of the Rephaites. See, his bedstead was an iron bedstead. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 amah is its length, and 4 amah its width, according to the amah of a man.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, next up, Michael. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Michael, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Michael's going to take us now from verse 12 to verse 29 of chapter 3. 12 to 29.
And this land, which we possessed at that time, from our heir, which is by the Wadi Arnon, and the mountains of Gilad and its cities, I gave to the Reubenites and the Gadites, and the rest of Gilad, and all Bashan, the reign of Og. I gave to half the tribe of Manasseh all the district of Argob, with all Bashan, called the land of the Rephaites. Yair, son of Manasseh, had taken all the district of Argob, as far as the border of the Geshurites and the Mahakites, and called them after his own name, the Bashan of Hawoth Yair, to this day. And to Machir I gave Gilad, and to the Reubenites and the Gadites I gave from Gilad, as far as the Wadi Arnon, the middle of the Wadi as the border, as far as the Wadi Yabuk, the border of the children of Ammon, and the desert plain with the Yarden as the border, from Kinnereth as far as the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, below the slopes of Pisgah on the east. And I commanded you at that time, saying, Yah your Elohim has given you this land to possess. All you sons of might, pass over armed before your brothers, the children of Israel. But let your wives and your little ones and your livestock, I know that you have much livestock, stay in your cities which I have given you, until Yah has given rest to your brothers as to you, and they also possess the land which Yah your Elohim is giving them before the Yarden. Then you shall return, each man to his possession which I have given you. And I commanded Yehoshua at that time, saying, your eyes have seen all that Yah your Elohim has done to these two sovereigns. Yah does the same to all the reigns which you are passing over. Do not fear them, for Yah your Elohim himself fights for you. And I pleaded with Yah at that time, saying, O Master Yah, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For who is a mighty one in the heavens or on the earth who does according to your works and according to your might? I pray, let me pass over and see the good land beyond the Yarden, this good hill country in Lebanon. But Yah was enraged with me for your sake. It would not listen to me. And Yah said to me, enough of that. Speak no more to me about this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah and lift up your eyes westward and northward and southward and eastward, and look with your eyes, for you do not pass over this Yarden. But command Yehoshua, and strengthen him, and make him brave, for he shall pass over before this people, and cause them to inherit the land which you see. And we dwelt in the valley opposite Be'eth Peor.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Michael. All right, Kendall. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Kendall, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Kendall's going to take us now to chapter 4 and read verses 1 through 19.
And now, O Israel, listen to the laws and the right rulings which I am teaching you to do, so that you live, and shall go in and possess the land which Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has given you. Do not add to the word which I command you, and do not take away from it, so as to guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim, which I am commanding you. Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did at Baal Peor, for Yahweh your Elohim has destroyed from your midst all the men who followed Baal Peor. But you who are clinging to Yahweh, your Elohim, are alive today, every one of you. See, I have taught you laws and right rulings, as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me, to do thus in the land which you go to possess. And you shall guard and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of all the peoples who hear all these laws, and they shall say, only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. For what great nation is there which has Elohim so near to it, as Yahweh our Elohim is to us, whenever we call on him? And what great nation is there that has such laws and righteous right rulings, like all this Torah which I set before you this day? Only guard yourself and guard your life diligently, lest you forget the words your eyes have seen, and lest they turn aside from your heart all the days of your life. And you shall make them known to your children and your grandchildren. The day when you stood before Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb, Yahweh said to me, assemble the people to me, and I make them hear my words, so that they learn to fear me all the days they live on the earth, and teach them to their children. And you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire to the heart of the heavens, darkness, cloud, and thick darkness. And Yahweh spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard a voice of words, but saw no form. You only heard a voice. And he made known to you his covenant, which he commanded you to do, the 10 words, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. And Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you laws and right rulings, for you to do them in the land which you pass over to possess. Therefore, diligently guard yourselves, for you saw no form when Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb, out of the midst of the fire, lest you should do corruptly, and shall make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth, or the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the heavens, the likeness of any creature that creeps on the ground, or the likeness of any fish that is in the water under the earth, unless you lift up your eyes to the heavens, and shall see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of the heavens, and you be drawn away into bowing down to them and serving them, which Yahweh your Elohim has allotted to all the peoples under all the heavens.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Kendall. All right. Dennis. All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Dennis, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Dennis is going to take us from verse 20 to 38. 20 to 38.
But Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Mitzrayim, to be his people and inheritance as it is today. And Yahweh was enraged with me because of your words, and swore that I would not pass over the Jordan, and that I would not enter the good land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. For I am to die in this land. I am not passing over the Jordan, but you are passing over, and shall possess the good land. Guard yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh, your Elohim, which he made with you, and shall make for yourselves a carved image in any form, as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a consuming fire, a jealous El. When you bring forth children and grandchildren shall grow old in the land, and shall do corruptly, and make a carved image in the form of whatever, and shall do what is evil in the eyes of Yahweh, your Elohim, to provoke him. I shall call the heavens and earth to witness against you on that day, that you soon completely perish from the land which you pass over the Jordan to possess. You do not prolong your days in it, but are completely destroyed. And Yahweh shall scatter you among the peoples, and shall be left few in number among the nations where Yahweh drives you. And there you shall serve mighty ones, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you shall seek Yahweh, your Elohim, and shall find, when you search for him with all your heart and with all your being. In your distress, with all these words shall come upon you in the latter days, when you shall return to Yahweh, your Elohim, and shall obey his voice. For Yahweh, your Elohim, is a compassionate El. He does not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them. For ask now of the days that are past, which were before you since the day that Elohim created man on the earth. And ask from one end of the heavens to the other end of the heavens, whether there has been a word as great as this, or has been heard like it. Has the people heard the voice of Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard and live? Or has Elohim tried to go and take for himself a nation from the midst of a nation by trials and by signs and by wonders and by battle and by a strong hand and an outstretched arm and by great fearsome deeds, according to all that Yahweh your Elohim did for you in Mitzrayim before your eyes? You have been shown it, and know that Yahweh himself is Elohim. There is no one beside him. From the heavens he let you hear his voice to instruct you. On earth he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved your fathers, therefore he chose their seed after them, and brought you out of Mitzrayim with his presence, with his great power, to drive out from before you nations greater and stronger than you, to bring you in, to give you their land as an inheritance, as it is today.
Amen. Thank you, Dennis. Hey. Mark. Yes. Okay, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Mark, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Mark's going to take us now from verse 39 through chapter 5, verse 10. So you got another one of those chapter jump deals. 4:39 to 5:10.
And you shall know today, and shall recall to your heart, that Jehovah himself is Elohim in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. And you shall guard his laws and his commands, which I command you today, so that it is well with you and with your children after you, and so that you prolong your days on the soil which Jehovah your Elohim has given you for all time. Then Moshe separated 3 cities beyond the Jordan, toward the rising of the sun, for a manslayer to flee there, he who unknowingly murdered his neighbor, without having hated him in time past, and might flee to one of these cities and live. Betzer in the wilderness in the level land for the Reubenites, and Ramoth in Gilad for the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan for the Menashites. And this is the Torah which Moshe set before the children of Israel. These are the witnesses and the laws and the right rulings which Moshe spoke to the children of Israel after they came out of Mitzrayim, beyond the Jordan in the valley opposite Beth Peor, in the land of Sihon, sovereign of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon, whom Moshe and the children of Israel had stricken after they came out of Mitzrayim. And they took possession of his land and the land of Og, sovereign of Bashan, 2 sovereigns of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan toward the rising of the sun, from Aroer, which is on the bank of the Wadi Arnon, even to Mount Sion, which is Hermon, and all the desert plain beyond the Jordan, as far as the sea of the Arabah, below the slopes of Pisgah. And Moshe called Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the laws and right rulings which I speak in your hearing today, and you shall learn them and guard to do them. Jehovah our Elohim made a covenant with us in Horeb. Jehovah did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, those who are here today, all of us who are alive. Jehovah spoke with you face to face on the mountain from the midst of the fire. I stood between Jehovah and you at that time to declare to you the word of Yehovah. For you were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up the mountain, saying, I am Yehovah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under the earth. You do not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, Yehovah your Elohim, am a jealous El, visiting the crookedness of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving commitments to thousands, to those who love me and guard my commands.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Mark. That's right. Okay. Whoop. Need that one. All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Timothy, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, he's going to now take us from verse 11 to the end of the chapter.
You do not bring the name of Yahweh, your Elohim, to naught, for Yahweh does not leave him unpunished who brings his name to naught. Guard the Sabbath day to set it apart as Yahweh, your Elohim, commanded you. 6 days you labor, and you shall do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of Yahweh, your Elohim. You do not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor your sojourner who is within your gates, so that your male servant and your female servant rest as you do. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mizraim, and that Yahweh your Elohim brought you out from there by a strong hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to perform the Sabbath day. Respect your father and your mother as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, so that your days are prolonged, and so that it is well with you on the soil which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. You do not murder, you do not commit adultery, you do not steal, you do not bear false witness against your neighbor, you do not covet your neighbor's wife, you do not desire your neighbor's house, his field, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor. These words Yahweh spoke to all your assembly in the mountain from the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and of the thick darkness, with a loud voice. And he added no more. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. And it came to be, when you heard the voice from the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, that you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders, and said, See, Yahweh your Elohim has shown us his esteem and his greatness, and we have heard his voice from the midst of the fire. Today we have seen that Elohim speaks with man, and he lives. And now, why should we die? For this great fire is consuming us. If we hear the voice of Yahweh, our Elohim, anymore, then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living Elohim speaking from the midst of the fire as we have, and does live? You go near and hear all that Yahweh, our Elohim, says, and speak to us all that Yahweh our Elohim says to you, and we shall hear and do it. And Yahweh heard the voice of your words when you spoke to me. And Yahweh said to me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken to you. They have done well in all that they have spoken. Oh, that they had such a heart in them to fear me and to guard all my commands always, so that it might be well with them and with their children forever. Go and say to them, return to your tents, but you stand here by me, and let me speak to you all the commands and the laws and the right rulings which you are to teach them. And they shall do them in the land which I am giving them to possess. And you shall guard to do as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you. Do not turn aside to the right or to the left. Walk in all the ways which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, so that you live, and it will be well with you, and you shall prolong your days in the land which you possess.
Amen. Amen. That's yours. Oh, he's going to use it? Okay. You need larger? We'll just hold this first. Well, we'll just do it from here. You can put it back down. We're going to read this here. All right, we're going to do a little bit something different here as we get into chapter 6. I'm going to read the first 3 verses. Then we all together are going to read the Shema and the V'ahavta, and then I'll have you read after that, okay? And this is the command, the laws, and the right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded to teach you to do in the land which you are passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh your Elohim to guard all his laws and his commands, which I command you, you and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, and that your days be prolonged. And you shall hear, O Yisrael, and shall guard to do, that it might be well with you, and that you increase greatly, as Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Together, hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Amen. Amen. Okay. Charlie. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Charlie, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Charlie's going to take us now from verse 10 to 25, which is the end of the chapter.
And it shall be, when Yahweh your Elohim brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov, to give you great and good cities which you did not build, the house filled with all kinds of goods which you did not fill, and wells dug which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you shall eat and be satisfied. Be on guard, lest you forget Yahweh, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from the house of bondage. Fear Yahweh your Elohim and serve him, and swear by his name. Do not go after other mighty ones, the mighty ones of the peoples who are all around you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a jealous El in your midst. Let the displeasure of Yahweh your Elohim burn against you, then he shall destroy you from the face of the earth. Do not try Yahweh your Elohim as you tried him in Massah. Diligently guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim and his witnesses and his laws which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of Yahweh, that it might be well with you, and you shall go in and possess the good land of which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to drive out all your enemies from before you, as Yahweh has spoken. When your son asks you in the time to come, saying, what is the meaning of the witnesses and the laws and the right rulings which Yahweh our Elohim has commanded you? Then you shall say to your sons, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, and Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand, and Yahweh sent signs and wonders, great and grievous, upon Mitzrayim, upon Pharaoh, and upon all his household, before our eyes. And he brought us out from there to bring us in, to give us the land of which he swore to our fathers. And Yahweh commanded us to do all these laws, to fear Yahweh our Elohim for our good always, to keep us alive as it is today. And it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all his command before Yahweh our Elohim, as he commanded us.
Amen. Okay, so Olivier, and then we'll go down and we'll get Rabbi Tom for the last one. Olivier, come on up. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Olivier, who's come up down on Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Olivier is going to take us into chapter 7 and read the first 13 verses.
When Yahweh your Elohim brings you into the land which you go to possess, he shall also clear away many nations before you, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Ewites, and the Jebusites. 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And when Yahweh your Elohim gives them over to you, you shall strike them and put them under the ban completely. Make no covenant with them, and show them no favor. And do not intermarry with them. You do not give your daughter to his son, and you do not take his daughter for your son. For he turns your sons away from following me to serve other mighty ones. Then the displeasure of Yahweh shall burn against you and promptly destroy you. But this is what you do to them. Break down their slaughter places, and smash them pillars, and cut down their asherim, and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a set-apart people to Yahweh your Elohim. Yahweh your Elohim has chosen you to be a people for himself, a treasured possession above all the peoples on the face of the earth. Yahweh did not set apart his love on you, nor choose you because you were more numerous than other people, for you were the least of all peoples. But because of Yahweh loving you, and because of him guarding the oath which he swore to your fathers, Yahweh has brought you out with strong hand and ransomed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, sovereign of Mizraim. And you shall know that Yahweh your Elohim, he is Elohim, the trustworthy El, guarding covenant and loving commitment for 1,000 generations with those who love him, and those who guard his commands. But repaying those who hate him to their face to destroy them, he does not delay to do so with him who hates him. He repays him to his face. And you shall guard the command and the laws and the right rulings which I command you today to do them. And it shall be, because you hear these right rulings and shall guard and do them, that Yahweh your Elohim shall guard with you the covenant and the loving commitment which he swore to your fathers, and shall love you and bless you and increase you, and shall bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your land, your grain and your new wine and your oil, the increase of your cattle and the offsprings of your flock, in the land of which he swore to your fathers to give you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Olivier. We're going to walk this mic down here to Rabbi Tom. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rabbi Tom, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us from verse 14 to the end of the chapter.
Blessed are you above all peoples. There's not going to be a barren man or a barren woman among you or among your livestock. And Yahweh shall turn away from you all sickness, and put on you none of the evil diseases of Mizraim, which you have known, but he shall put them on all those who hate you. And you shall consume all the peoples whom Yahweh your Elohim is delivering over to you. Your eye shall not pardon them, and do not serve their mighty ones, for that is a snare to you. When you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I am unable to drive them out, do not be afraid of them. Remember well what Yahweh your Elohim did to Pharaoh and to all Mizraim. The great trials which your eyes saw, and the signs and the wonders and the strong hand and the outstretched arm by which Yahweh, your Elohim, brought you out. Yahweh, your Elohim, does so to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. And Yahweh, your Elohim, also sends the hornet among them until those who are left, who hide themselves from you, are destroyed. Do not be afraid of them, for Yahweh, your Elohim, is a great and awesome El, is in your midst. And Yahweh, your Elohim, shall drive out those nations before you, little by little. You are not allowed to destroy them at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. But Yahweh, your Elohim, shall deliver them over to you and destroy them with a great destruction until they are consumed. And he shall give their sovereigns into your hand, and you shall destroy their name from under the heavens. No one is going to be able to stand against you until you have destroyed them. The carved images of their mighty ones you are to burn with fire, and do not covet the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, lest you be snared by it. For it is an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. And do not bring an abomination into your house, lest you be accursed like it. Utterly loathe it and utterly hate it, for it is accursed.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Tom. Okay, thank you to all the readers. I do appreciate everyone and their coming up to read today. There's a traditional blessing for after the Torah readings. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh your Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh, giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. All right. Fantastic job, all the readers. Okay. Now, a couple of things real quick, because I know some people walked in who were still sitting at breakfast having their coffee while we started. Okay, so today, after we finish this, we have lunch, and after lunch, we're going to try to take a group picture. If you have an MTOI shirt, that'd be great if you could wear it. It's not required, but it'd be really great. We will leave from here to take the picture. So after lunch, come back here, and I think we're going to be going over to an open amphitheater that's over near where the children's classes are by the Ivy building. Okay, then after that, we're going to have the marketplace open here for a little bit, then the Pidyon Haben, the redeeming of the firstborn, and our mikveh in the afternoon. And all those things we should be doing leaving from here, okay? So I will have mikveh directions on the back table for you after lunch. I haven't printed them out yet. Well, I did print a few copies, but only like 5 or 10. At least, now some of you, please, if you have GPS, just look at the paper, plug it into your phone or your GPS device, and leave the papers. That way I don't have to print 400 of them. I'll try to print just enough that the people who need them can have them. Otherwise, if you could just walk over, punch it into your device, that would be great. All right. So hopefully that covers it. And, of course, we have our Torah study tonight after supper. Okay. So hopefully, well, there wasn't really much to talk about, right? So we can kind of end right here? No. All right, so hopefully we all understand sort of the ground rules. I'm going to remind everybody about how we do our studies. Number one, okay, we're looking in the study to understand the context, especially what we can glean out of what we're reading that would be something that we could apply in our lives to help us with our walk. Okay, that's always how we do these studies. I know a lot of groups love to just look for Messiah in the Torah study, and that's great. Every time we read about Torah, we read about the Word, we're always reading about Messiah. But what I want us to be doing at this point, and we've done it the whole cycle this year, is I want us to look for, as we're reading it, what in there. Remember, Paul tells us it's all his examples there. It's for our benefit to glean out of so we can apply it in our walk, in our transitioning from what we are into what he is, in our transforming and conforming into him, okay? So that being said, that's what I want us looking for, okay? Now, For the context, I'll throw this out there before we start. The context here is, again, we have to remember that this book is not written to us, it was written for us. It comes from a time many, thousands of years ago. Okay, so that being said, we have to think about culturally what things were like. Back then, they didn't have written records. They didn't have books. It was a big deal for Moses to write this stuff down. Got a wasp up here flying around. Okay. Anyway, so they didn't have the written records. They didn't have everybody have books and things to keep the annals and things like that so easily. They did write things in clay and stone and that kind of thing, but nobody, generally had these things at home or to carry around. So it was very much a normal thing to pass down the history by oral tradition. And so you see Moses doing that here, because some of you might be wondering, what is he kind of reviewing everything for? And why do you see that in so many of the Psalms? And why do we see it in so many places? Well, it is essentially a review, because that's how they passed the history down. You would say it over and over and then have the children repeat it back so that they would understand these are the journeys and these are our family members, these are our genealogies. And you would learn your genealogies. Most of us don't know how to go maybe further back than a great-grandparent, if you can go back that far. Okay? If they're not alive, you probably don't know them. That's the way we are culturally today. They had to memorize all the way back pretty much to Adam. Okay? And they would know their genealogies. And so here, just to kind of goes to context, this is what Moses is doing here, is he's starting off by saying, okay, before we cross the Jordan here, before you guys go off and start your journey in the land, let's remember where we came from. Okay, so that's also part of it, the oral passing down of history, but also God always wants you to know and appreciate where you came from and appreciate that you're not there anymore. Not so much that you look back going, oh, the leeks. We had some chicken with leeks the other night. I thought that was hysterical. And it was good. Not good enough for me to want to go back to Egypt, though. It wasn't that good. All right. So that's our context. So if you have a question or comment, we're going to ask you to come up here into the front row so you can go ahead and get a seat. We're not going to be able to bring the microphone so much. So if you have a question or comment, come on up here, get into the front row. We'll give it a minute here for people. We also on the live stream, we've got Kurt and Rob monitoring the live stream. Okay. Is that microphone on already over here? We have HH2 on. Yep, must be on. As you touched it, it made a noise. Okay. All right. Okay, so hold on one second. And then what we'll do is just have you grab a hold of the mic so that you don't have to try to bend into it. You can pull it right out of there. It comes out. There you go. Okay, so tell us your name and what's your question or comment.
So my name is Philip.
Hey, Philip.
And hi there. How had our first century brothers and sisters been reading the Shema? Like their posture, like when were they reading it? So that way we know how to emulate them.
Okay, so when was the Shema read? I mean, we can go back and try to research that if we wanted to, and I'm sure we can see the history. The Jewish community today, the Shema is a staple part of all of their prayer time. So they would have been doing it in the morning, they would have been doing it in the evening at the very least. Okay, so it was a very important part of any kind of a gathering of service. So they would have done it on Shabbat during their services. As a matter of fact, it pops up multiple times during their services because their services tend to go a while and it has different sections to it, and so the Shema would be in there. Okay? Often it was the last thing that the Jewish people would say when they were being killed. You know, they were under attack, they were dying. That would be the last thing they would want to recite before passing. So it doesn't have any kind of a strict rule, but these are the things where they commonly did it. Okay? And then you have to hold that mic. Just hold on to it while you're up there. It'd be easier.
And then, like, how were they saying it? Like the frame of mind, their posture.
You know, the way they do it today, they're going to be, in a very reverent mindset. They're very vertically connected. They often cover their eyes as they're saying it, and the reason is that they want to have no distractions. Okay, they're covering their eyes so that nothing should distract them while they are reciting the prayer, because they're trying to be completely vertically connected as they're recognizing that this is something that was for them. They are Israel, and they are to hear, to shema what the Creator is saying, and to remind themselves, and continuing straight into the V'ahavta, that it's something that's done in every aspect of your daily life. When you rise up, when you lay down, when you're walking by the way, when you're working, what you're thinking, that's what the front is before your eyes, and what you're doing with the works of your hands. And so it was very reverent. It was done very often. Somebody needs to get that wasp. Missed it. Thank you. All right, Kirk got it. See, at my office, I almost brought it with me. I've got my tennis racket-looking zapper, because I got a whole bunch of them in the ceiling behind the tiles, and they come out like every day. And so, anyway, so hopefully that explains it. I mean, it's the staple, foundational, core piece in their traditional mindset, and it still is. I mean, there's nothing more critical to their understanding. Now think about it. It harkens back to the covenant, because the covenant was, if you would hear and do, I would take you as my people. So the whole covenant is based on Shema. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good question. Thank you. Okay, so you can just pass the mic to the next person. All right, Tracy.
Hi, hey, thank you, Rabbi, for allowing us to read the Torah together. It's actually, or Deuteronomy together. It's really neat to be able to do that. You often talk about understanding.
Put it right up by the mouth.
Understanding, doing, defending, and teaching the word. And there's one statement in here in Deuteronomy 4, verse 24, which often causes some people to stumble, which is, for Yahuwah your Elohim is a consuming fire, a jealous El. And that jealous is in a Western mindset, it's quite, brings up lots of different thoughts and meanings in different people's minds. And I was wondering if, Rabbi, you could bring a bit more clarity or understanding from a Hebrew mindset as to what that jealous might mean, because jealous is a very human emotion, and to what it might mean for El to be jealous.
Right. That's a good question, and that's one of the verses I probably have marked in my notes here, and I've got a whole lot of notes that I've marked down over time. Let me just see, 4:24. Yeah. The idea there, and we see this in lots of places, the word jealous, it really means zealous to take action. In other words, I've told you that I'm going to do these different things, that if you do this, that you would then reap the blessing, but if you do that, you're going to reap the cursing. He wanted the people to know, look, I am not hesitant or reluctant. But it gets translated, again, it's a word that could be translated as jealous, but it's more, I am zealous to take action. Okay? And so he's saying, in other words, don't think that I'm playing games here. If you're going to do these things, know that Yahweh your Elohim is a consuming fire. He is zealous to implement what he has said he's going to implement. Does that make more sense?
It does make more sense, yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, Christina?
It's rather funny that she said that, because I had two questions. That was one of them. So just to clarify on that question about the jealous El, oftentimes that is also used for like talking about the bridegroom and being jealous for his bride. Sorry. And I was wondering if that still applies, if maybe the word is just differently in those areas, or if it's applied differently.
No, it's okay. First of all, we do have a verse that says he is not a man to react as a man does. Okay? But on the other hand, he's also communicating to human beings, to men, women. Okay? Mankind. And so he has to use language we would understand. So we understand jealous. You belong to me, nobody else should have you. This is mine, it's not yours. There's a possessive ownership piece to that. So in jealousy, there's a negative, very detrimental emotion, but also there could be a positive thought to the idea that you are recognizing that this is mine and I'm protective of it. And that's, I think, more what's trying to come across here.
So there's
Okay?
really no like actual emotion like what we experience.
I wouldn't say that there's an emotion. Look, just like he says, you know, it was in chapter 1. Can't remember where the verse was. But anyway, he used a metaphor in the early chapters where he talks about how basically, you know, he was like a father and these kind of things. You know, there's these metaphors that are not literal. Look, I don't want to blow your heads up and mess everything up, but you know, the Father and the Son are not literally Father and Son like we understand it. It's only the closest metaphor so we can understand them. Okay? Because there wasn't a mother and a father and sex and a baby. That's how we understand Son coming from. But he's brought forth from the Father, whatever that means. In our world, we can think about in our dimensions what that might mean, but they're not from our world, so to speak. You know, they're outside of time and space. So they have to speak in a language we can understand. It's just like when you talk to someone who's a little child, you can't talk with maybe the language you would use as an adult because the child doesn't understand. And so he uses the imagery of bride and bridegroom because people understand that relationship, that covenanting, that committing. People understand jealousy. Say, look, there's a couple of places where it says, Yah was enraged with me. That's a human emotion. But the people understand that emotion. Okay? And so we have to understand that he's not subject to being emotionally enraged like we are and having all those negative emotional things. But he has to let us know what we should picture or imagine, so it gives us the right understanding and the right motivation of how to respond. You respond a certain way knowing somebody might be enraged. You respond a certain way knowing somebody might be pleased. Okay? And so these are words and language that are used. So it's a good question. But let us always understand that we have two beings that are not of this species. Okay? It's like I always talk about the amoeba trying to understand a human being. They can't. Now, of course, if an amoeba was transformed and conformed and then, you know, putting off amoebahood to become human, it would get it. And that's what 1 John is about. John says, you know, we don't know what he's like, except we know that when we meet him and we see him, we'll be like him, and then we'll get it because we'll have been changed to be like him. And so once we're of the Elohim species, so to speak, and we're changed from corruptible to incorruptible, we'll understand. But right now, he communicates with what we would understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like we're babies trying to figure that out. The other question that I had is in chapter 5, 2 through 4, it talks about he made a covenant with, not with your fathers, but with you. In my understanding, he was speaking to the children who were under the age of 20 at that point. How is it that he was making, that Yahweh made a covenant with the children, but not with the fathers, but the fathers were the ones who had actually stood at Mount Sinai and all that?
Again, this is because we are thinking human, linear type of thinking. What he's trying to communicate here, and it's being translated into Hebrew from his head into a language, and then from that language into English, is he said, look, I made this covenant with you. You're the ones that made it through. Not with your fathers who chose to break the covenant. So it's not that he didn't make the covenant with them. Remember, covenant's two-sided. You have to agree and I have to agree to something. That's a covenant. He said, your fathers apparently really didn't understand. I made it with you guys because you're going to receive what the covenant said you would receive. You're going to go into the land. So he's not saying I didn't make a covenant with them. He's saying they didn't covenant with me. They didn't get here. They had to end up in the desert and stay in the desert. Does that kind of make sense? Again, it's a hard way for him to explain it and phrase it, but he's saying, look, he was trying to tell them is like, you guys are the ones who are covenanted. They didn't make it to this point. So pay attention to that covenant that we have because you've made it this far. Okay? And I think that's really critical.
And I feel like that's probably something that we as believers and followers and Torah pursuant, Torah observant people probably need to look at and observe, because if we don't go in that direction, then it'll pass to our children. And I'm not one that wants to do that. I want to go in.
All right. Now, just to throw this out there as we're getting the next person up, it's very important that we are learning, and I've been hitting this as hard as I can hit it, that context is going to help you with everything. So you have to think about, okay, why would he be saying this? Okay, who's saying it? Why are they saying it? Where are they? What's the situation? All of that contextual stuff. All right, so Yah is speaking through Moses to Israel, but they're at the Jordan, and it's the ones who made it through from the covenanting moment at Sinai to this point. And so Moses is trying to remind them, hey, don't forget, just because you were little kids and you weren't 20 yet at Sinai, this is a covenant with you. They covenanted too, but they chose not to make it through. But you may think, well, I wasn't 20 and I was a kid, and so what's it have to do with me? No, you were covenanting. It was with all of you. Because, when you read what happened, and again, you're going to read what's going on by the time we get to the end of Deuteronomy, he said, this is for you and your family and your children and the generations even to come, who will choose to covenant. So hopefully that makes some sense. But it's all about context, and maybe some of you have never heard that before, but what I tell everybody all the time is always you should be aware who's speaking, who's listening, who's the audience, who's he directing it to, because Christianity's done a terrible job with this in trying to help people understand, well, anything you want to choose is about you just because you choose it to be, because it sounds good. Well, I definitely going to have a baby because he told Sarah she's going to have a baby. Well, no, he told Sarah she was going to have a baby. You've got a whole different situation. You can't claim that promise. That doesn't mean you won't have one. You just can't claim that promise. It wasn't made to you. So you have to have your context. So who's speaking? Who's the audience? What's going on at the moment? Why is there a discussion going on? Where are they? When are they? What's the situation? And then you got to ask, why is this even being talked about? This book is, fairly large as books go, but it's really small, covering, 4,000 years of history. It's a really tiny book if you think of that. So why did that little thing make it in here, and why is it important? That's what we have to be asking. Why did that get in here? And so hopefully that gives you a framework for context. Okay, next.
I'm Pete.
Hey, Pete.
What struck me in chapter 1 is this starts off with Moshe is pretty much telling the folks, all right, it's time to go. It's time to go. And then it goes under there's too many of you, so representatives are appointed for him. And then the representatives come to him and say, why don't we send some folks out to check this place out instead? And then in verse 23, it says, and the matter was good in my eyes. That's the point at which Moshe decided not to guard the command of Yahweh. Instead of saying, no, Yahweh said, go. It's yours, go and take it. Instead, they didn't trust. And so I think Moshe kind of signed off on them not trusting and allowed those spies to go out. Whereas if he'd have stood firm and said, no, Yahweh has commanded this is your land, it's been promised to you, go and do it. I think that's part of guarding, is that we take those risks, that we follow God's laws, that we take the risk. We put ourselves at risk in trusting that Yahweh, that if we're doing what he tells us to do, then he's going to look out for us. Because it's like Abraham. When Abraham was told to go, he went. He didn't say, well, let me send some folks out first and check it out and see if it's okay. No, he went. And I think that's what God expected the people to do, was to go and not compromise. And Moshe signed off on them compromising.
Okay, so let me maybe repackage that. Okay? First of all, let's look at, I think I like the way you rephrased it as signing off. I don't think when it says, and the matter was good in my eyes, it simply says, I think sort of idiomatically, he said, and I agreed to do it. Okay? These guys wanted to do it, and I said, okay, I agreed to do it. Now, it may have been good in his eyes, but I think we're jumping to the wrong conclusion based on what happened. What if he was saying, okay, maybe they need to see it's as good as he said it is, so they get excited about it? As opposed to not trusting. Maybe he was thinking, good, you go, you'll come back, you'll get all excited. And two of them did. Exactly what I think. I think Moses expected the Joshua and Caleb thing to be all 12. So maybe he wasn't feeding into the not trusting. Maybe he was trying to get him excited and encouraged. Yeah, go look at it. See what Yah has for you. Yah never tells him that he did a wrong thing here. And you don't see any discussion there. So, because he gets scolded for his little problem at the rock with the, where he lost his temper. But he doesn't get in trouble for this. And so there may have been a discussion, and we don't always see it, where Moses was like, well, what do you think? And Yah says, yeah, let him go ahead and do it. Because there's a lot of things that people go and do, and Yah says, yeah, look, when Jeroboam and Rehoboam had their split, Yah said, hey, that split works for my plans. Okay? So he knew this would also work for his plan. So I'm sure that there was more in here, because remember, you have some conversations in here that you don't have everywhere. Like, for example, in verse 22, when it says, let us send men before us and search out the land, we don't see that expressed exactly the same when it actually happens. We don't see Moses saying that he agreed with exactly that way. Also, the idea of when it says the people, when Moses in verse 9 says, I'm unable to bear by myself, and then go ahead and do all this stuff, Yithro is left out of the whole mix here. So you don't get all the details in each place. Sometimes you get less, sometimes you get more. And so I think we're missing a little bit here. I think that Moses, with Yah in hand, was saying, okay, let them go and see, and let's see where their hearts are at. Because they should come back, as Caleb and Joshua did, and said, wow, this place is exactly like he said it is. Actually, it's bigger and better and more awesome. We could not actually have imagined it, and we got to see it. Look at the size of those grapes. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of walls and some people and everything else, but we're not worried about that. He already said he's going to take care of that. But the stuff he said was there. See, and that's, I think, a great metaphor for us, because he tells us all the good stuff we can expect, and then we get tested in trials and all this other stuff, and we forget that's part of the package. And then we start to doubt. And then we forget about all the things that have happened that are amazing in your lives, and just your whole lives are different and changed in wonderful ways, just like he promised it would be. So I think it's a good point you're bringing up, but I don't know for sure, and it's certainly possible, I wouldn't say for sure that Moses necessarily, so I'm not trying to spin this, you don't have to put on your seatbelts, I'm not spinning it too much here, but I think it's certainly possible that he was optimistic that they would go out there and come back like Joshua and Caleb. Good, let them go and see. Let them come back excited. After all, they should have already seen what happened with Egypt. They should trust Yah. They've already had other issues coming up to this point. This is, hey, go see it. And so I would say that that's certainly possible as well.
Well, the other thing that occurred to me when I saw that language there is very often we get in trouble when we see things as good in our eyes to us, and we get that self-sovereign thing instead of considering what is good in Yahweh's eyes.
Right, and I just don't think Moses did that, because then he would have definitely been taken to task on it, and we don't ever see that anywhere. So it's certainly possible that he did that, and Yah allowed it because it would serve its purpose. I just don't know that we should, in fairness, jump to that conclusion. I would leave it as, it could have gone either way, okay? And so either one is certainly possible, but to be more confident, I would have liked to have seen Yahweh take him to task on it. Like, hey, excuse me, I never told you. I told you to trust me. And if Yah had a problem with him smacking the rock, certainly he would have had a problem, doing this. Excuse me, if it was a problem. Okay, James.
Morning, Rabbi.
Morning.
Questions about chapter 4, 16 to 19, and it's talking about making images and things along those lines.
Bring it right up to your mouth.
Would that also be talking about things that basically any kind of religious symbol, whether it be a cross, Star of David, fish, lamb, or even candlesticks?
So he's talking about in the Ten Commandments, in the section where it talks about do not make image. Well, actually, it's not even the Ten Commandments, but he's talking about chapter 4. He also talks about, obviously, in chapter 5, the idea of not making images, not making likenesses. And I've taught this before, and I think it's a good question that comes up. Look, he's talking not about artwork. He's not talking about things, so you can't make anything that looks like anything on the earth. He's talking about for the purpose of you looking at it as the creator, or a part of a pantheon of deities of some sort, like they had in a lot of cultures. The god of this and the god of that, and they made images of them. And they bowed down to them, or they prayed to them, or they gave them credit. It's just like they did with the calf. Okay, and the calf wasn't even called a different name. It was said, this is Yahweh who brought you out of Egypt. He says, don't make images and think they're me. And don't make images that are definitely not me, but you're going to treat them as if they're a creator being. Baal, or Chemosh, or whoever, okay? Dagon. And so, if the things that you have were never used in any kind of pagan rituals, were not like, because people will go to like an antique shop and find something cool only to find out it was a fertility thing in some culture. look, if you find out that something is and never was used for that kind of stuff, so you need to get rid of those things. Okay? And it definitely talks about that in the end of chapter 7, where it says that these things are to be destroyed. You're to burn them with fire. Do not covet the silver or gold. In other words, you don't get, like your Christmas stuff doesn't get sold. Because otherwise you're coveting the gold and silver you could get from them. You just throw them out. Now you don't have to set them on fire because a lot of that stuff is toxic. It'll kill everybody. Okay? But destroy them. Throw them out. Get rid of them. Okay? If it's not good for you, it's not good for anybody else. Why would you give it to anybody? Oh, but you don't know how much money I spent on that stuff. Well, you're not getting the money back. So what do you care? Destroy it. All right? You know how much money they spent on all those idols back in those days? They were made out of silver and gold and all kinds of things. Don't worry about this stuff. Burn them. Destroy them. Okay? So we're talking about things. Then what about crosses and stars of David and all those kind of things? Well, crosses are really coming back from Tammuz and Egyptian worship and the Ankh and all that kind of stuff. So I would be a no definitely to crosses. The Star of David, that's a chicken or the egg thing. I believe that David had it first. Satan took it later. I've got some guys out there that I know. I have confidence about this because these are guys who have written articles where they think everything is pagan. Okay? And yet they think this may have been David first. And that surprised me, actually. One of the guys who's one of those researchers that, basically you can't say any word because somehow it's a pagan word and you can't look at it. I mean, everything is pagan to these guys. And yet, somehow, in the research, they find that it actually is a symbol. If you look at the Paleo-Hebrew, the Dalet is like a triangle, and you basically have the two triangles for David, okay? So I know a lot of people don't like it. We had some people make a big issue and leave a feast one year over it because somebody put some of them on our sukkah. And they came and had a little meltdown with me, and I said, I don't agree. I don't think it's a problem. I generally don't use them, wear them, or do anything with them because I don't want to cause my brother to argue with me. I didn't say stumble. I just don't want to argue. Okay? Because if they stumble over my wearing something, then they're really having a different problem. Okay? But I don't want to argue. But if you're wearing one, I wouldn't give you any grief, wouldn't give you any problems, because I believe it's probably one of those things where, it's just like, look, Yeshua came. Do you know how many other messiahs came before Messiah Yeshua that have almost the same story? Oh, so you're going to believe that he's the fake or they're the fake? And those other ones came first, sort of. Okay? So I'm just saying, how do you deal with that stuff? So it's the old chicken or the egg thing. So, if when in doubt, don't. You don't need to use it unless Yah tells you to use something. So when you're not sure, then you can certainly avoid those things. But, if you happen to like horses, nothing wrong with having pictures of horses or little anything. If you happen to like, my aunt, I always tell the story how she loved penguins. So she had a whole collection of penguins. Whether they were made out of stone or glass or whatever, she would find them in different stores in different places and had a collection of them. I promise you, I never saw her praying to the penguins. Okay? Just thought they were cute for whatever reason, like them. Okay? I happen to like rhinoceros if there's an imagery about them charging down and not caring about what gets in their way. And so I've had, I don't collect them, I don't have a bunch of them, but I certainly have had pictures to kind of remind me to go straight and don't care about what's going on and just, keep your focus. So, look, these things are okay. Just don't pray to them. Don't think they're Yah. And if anybody had ever used it for such a thing, then don't own it. Does that make sense? All right, did that answer your question? Okay, good.
Yeah, my other question was from 7:3.
Okay.
It's basically telling you, I just wanted to clarify, it's basically telling you once you're in the covenant, if you're going to get married, you need to marry someone in the covenant and make sure your daughters marry someone in the covenant.
Okay, so we have some cultural issues here as well as covenant issues. Now remember, this context, one of the pieces of context that you have to have here is these instructions are, at the most simplest sort of understanding, are for corporate Israel, because they were covenanting as a nation. That doesn't mean that you as individuals are not required to behave a certain way within covenant, but some of the stuff is with the understanding that corporate Israel, because what had happened, and we know what happened, is that there was the events with Balaam, and we have the idea that the women then came in right after that, and they were giving their sons and daughters and back and forth, and next thing you know, they're all running off in the wrong direction. And so absolutely, I would be encouraging my children to, not be unequally yoked. Here's your problem. Your children are not, as they were, automatically covenanted just because you are. They live in the world, not in the nation called Israel. I'm not talking about the one from 1948. I mean the covenanted Israel. But I would encourage them to know that, and a lot of you have this situation, so you know just how fun it is. Being unequally yoked is not fun. Okay? And yoked, is really a discipleship type of language. In other words, don't be unequally instructed or discipled or submitted to an authority and a teaching structure. And so in their belief system. Because I know that a lot of you, one and not the other was called first. Now, I know a lot of you eventually both, and so you have a great time and everything's good now. But when it wasn't, it wasn't. And so, yeah, I would encourage, where did James go? Okay, over there in the back. Okay, I would encourage that with the children. I would want them to understand the reasons for that verse. And I would encourage them. But you know what? We don't live in a world where we have that much authority. Our children turn 18 or 20, whatever it is, and they can just go off and do whatever they want to do. See, in this context, the nation would have influence, the eldership, the leadership, and they would also be shown, there's the edge of the camp. You can go out there and do that. But you can't do that in the camp. We don't have a camp to do it in. So really, that's the bigger context for verse 3 there about not intermarrying with them, so to speak. Don't bring that in the camp. They can do that outside the camp. You can't bring it inside the camp. If they're doing it outside the camp, they're not actually part of the covenanted camp. All right? So this is not permission for you as parents to get that involved in your children's, marital plans. It's their life. It's their journey. But just you can encourage them why this is in Scripture. Because they will, my husband, my fiance, or whatever, the boyfriend I have, the both of us, we don't really believe anything and we're great. Well, once you have kids, that may not be the case. One of you may decide you believe something. Because I hear that all the time. Well, if I don't believe anything and he doesn't believe anything or she doesn't believe anything, and whatever it is, well, we're on the same page. We're just walking through life. Well, that doesn't always work that way when children get there. Now, what are you going to do once children get there? Somebody may all of a sudden, have a vertical moment and decide that they want their child to understand something vertically. Now what? What if you don't end up on the same page? These are the kinds of things you might want to know beforehand. Okay, good question. Okay, Mark.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I've wondered here recently about the issue of idolatry and have wondered whether or not it's more subtle than just bowing down to, say, statues of Mary, for example, in the Catholic Church. And I wondered what your thoughts were on issues, and as we were reading earlier, I was seeing where it says don't bow down to their mighty ones and so forth. I've wondered, and I don't really want this to be true because I know it would be very hard in a lot of cases, especially for people, families that have children. But as it regards, say, mighty ones, for example, in sports, or like how that in this country, and I guess all countries throughout the world, are really big on stars, football and soccer and so forth. And also popular culture is also really big on like superheroes in movies where there's always a mighty one saving the planet or the universe, whichever. And but I've wondered, because we tend to think of idolatry as pagan worship, and I think for a lot of us that grew up as Christians, we've looked often at the Catholics and we've said to ourselves, well, that's idolatry, praying to saints and worshiping, praying before statues and so forth. So I wondered what your thoughts were on all that as it regards the things that are in popular culture. I appreciate it.
Okay, so that's a good question. Look, idolatry is one of those things where just like Yeshua, when he came and started teaching, he taught the Peshat. Okay, let's kind of just remind everybody. Everybody know what Peshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod is? If you don't, raise your hand. Who doesn't know what that is? Okay, so let's explain that. So the Jewish community, who's been studying this longer than anybody else who lives, who's alive, whatever, because as a culture, they've gone and journeyed from this point, okay? They have, in their studies, they believe they've discerned that the scriptures are written on at least 4 levels. Okay, there's some that see 13 levels and other things like that, but there's at least 4 levels, 4 basic levels. And there's an acronym, okay, which is, letters that are not really a word, but we look at them as a word, okay, called Pardes, which is 4 letters for Peshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, P-R-D-S, okay? And Peshat is the very simple, straightforward, most basic literal understanding you could have out of something. Like when it says, don't murder. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. But then Yeshua says, oh, there's another level to that. If you're angry with your brother and you say, Racha, and all these things, that's also breaking the murder command. So there is a deeper understandings. So the Peshat is the simple, the Drash is the more allegorical in the discussion, the Remez is the hinted at. Something hints at something, it doesn't come out and say it straightforward. And the Sod is the hidden. Of course, the important thing is that no matter which level you go, the rule is that if you're going so deep in the direction you're going and it no longer looks like the Peshat at all, you've gone too far. Okay, so your rabbit trail should never take you off in a direction that loses the basic, simple meaning. So Yeshua took us into a little bit deeper meaning. He says it means more than that. When it says, do not commit adultery, you shouldn't even be lusting after somebody even if you haven't slept with them. So now let's take that with the idolatry. Idolatry in its Peshat simplicity is don't make things out of wood and stone and whatever and worship them as Elohim, as mighty ones. But there's a deeper level we could take to, and that would include, by the way, self-sovereignty, is who do you give authority to in your life? Okay? Because he should have that authority. Anything that should be his that you give to anyone else, that's idolatry. Anything that should be his that you give to someone else is a form of idolatry. Okay? That includes you keeping money that belongs to him. Now you're following a different sovereignty, self-sovereignty. That includes time that belongs to him, like Shabbat, like holy days, right? So these are all things that belong to him. So let's just cover it from there. So can we, with celebrity people, whether it be Hollywood type stuff or sports or whatever it is, it could be in business, it could be anything. And whatever you do, it could be in music, whatever it is where you're so impressed with somebody that you now give them sort of some say in your life, or you kind of almost like worship them or idolize them. That's what we call it, idolize. Look, in the States here, they have the whole show called American Idol. Okay? Now, that's not literally idolatry, but it means that we look up to them with such amount of awe. And that's where, if that amount of awe was in the wrong direction like that, it certainly could fall into idolatry. Okay, so that's first. Now, as far as all of the things like superheroes and all of that stuff, look, maybe I'm out in the fringes or something. I'm not afraid of that stuff like some of you are. I don't know why you're so afraid of it. There's a thing called entertainment. And if you understand something as entertainment, it's entertainment. Okay? Look, I grew up with a whole bunch of guys that played Dungeons and Dragons when I was like little, young, whatever, teenager, and not a single one of them got into Satan worship or any kind of other thing. They grew up to be very healthy, normal people with normal lives and normal families and whatever. And I know a lot of people that read Harry Potter, and they didn't turn into witches and warlocks and sorcerers. Okay? And people that have watched the Marvel movies and the other things, and they didn't turn into, I don't know, whatever. It's entertainment. And so I know a lot of you are afraid of that stuff, and you think it brings demons in and all that stuff. That's Christianized thinking. Okay? I mean, I remember when Harry Potter came out, we did have a congregation back then, and I'm telling you, people about lost their minds. And I don't get that. That's a fear-based thing. Okay? I had people in our congregation. There was one couple. They're not with us anymore, but they used to be a part of the congregation. I'm telling you, if they ever came to your house, they would be looking at everything on your coffee table, everything in your movie rack, anything in your CD rack, and even what's in your cabinet in your bathroom. They wanted to find a demon or a problem under every book, every bottle, everything. This is what they would do. Okay? And I'm telling you, that stuff's in my opinion, just not true. It just doesn't work that way. If there are children or people that end up in those weird directions, they were going to end up there anyway. They already had some sort of a mindset issue problem, and this was not the problem. This is not the cause of it, okay? I grew up listening to the same songs that everybody thought was like whatever, all that hard rock, noisy, whatever stuff. I grew up with that stuff. It didn't turn me into anything. I'm here teaching you guys, okay? You know what first books I read? I read all the mythologies. Because I hated reading, and I found the stories were like reading a comic book. I thought it was more exciting to read about Hercules doing whatever he did. It didn't turn me into a Roman Greek mythology person. I never thought anything of it was real. It never occurred to me that it was real. Okay? So I know, and I'm not saying to change any of your policies with your family. Your policy is your policy. Okay? By the way, that same couple freaked out because they found out I went to a martial arts class. They thought that's all, pagan and demonic, and, sent me an article where some guy said that they learned that the martial artists, as black belts, they learned how to levitate. So I called my rabbi friend, a friend of mine, he passed away recently, but I called him back then, and I said, I know he studied the same style I did. I said, did you take that levitation class? I don't remember it. He said, no, we didn't have that one either. I learned how to defend myself. We didn't have a Buddha to rub its belly in our dojo. We didn't pray to anybody in it. But I learned how to block and kick and punch, and more importantly, how to have a mindset to be aware of danger. It's a military art. The Jews, when they came out, the Israelites, when they came out of Egypt, what are the first things that they did? They were taught to use a sword, put on armor. You know what they did? They took martial arts. Swords, shields, bows, arrows, that's martial arts. Guns, as we have today, these are military arts. But everybody seems to have this incredible need to be afraid of everything. Because you come from a place where everything has demons behind it, and you're bringing demons into your house and all that other stuff. If you're all worried about that, blow a shofar, blast it, walk around with incense, I don't know, whatever's going to make you think it's crazy. You're feeding into a mindset that's not going to get you where you need to go. Okay? You don't like the stuff? Don't do it. It's like I used to listen to radio and guys would call in saying how they didn't like the person on the radio show. It's like, well, good, don't listen to the show. Listen to something else. It's like when people put negative comments on my videos. This is to watch something else. Why do if you don't like it, do something else. You don't want to watch, the latest Star Wars movie that's coming out. You don't want to watch Marvel stuff. You don't want to read Harry Potter. You don't want your kids to. That's your stuff. Don't do it. Okay? But I'm not afraid of that stuff. Okay? And so that's just me. Okay? And I've not seen that that's the actual cause of any problem for anybody. If they have a problem, it's a lot of other stuff, okay? I don't see it as the cause. And that's my official position so that you hear it, so I'm glad you brought that up, okay? But I don't think that actually fits into that. Now, if you happen to be someone that everything in your house and everything in your life, and you start walking around quoting the movie as if you're a character in it, now you've got a different problem, okay? And I know people like that. They think they're Jedis. Okay, they've lost their minds. They say things like, this is not the pizza you want. So you don't eat their pizza. These are not the M&Ms you want. I mean, okay? I'm just throwing that out there. I think we're falling into way too much fear. Okay? Way too much fear. All right. Who's next? Okay, Santi, just grab a hold of the mic and hold it in your hand. Oh, there you go.
Rabbi, just a little bit of comment on the martial art, because my friend told me he practiced martial art, he's no longer do it because he said each action reflects the worship of Buddha. So, but if we think this is exercise, then it's different mindset.
Okay,
attitude.
just so that you know, I know people may say this or say that. I'm coming from a position of being a sensei. I took enough training to own my own school. And I can promise you there was never a single Buddhist or religious aspect to anything we did. I had people that had no coordination, couldn't walk and chew gum, that were able to then start to function, to get their body under their control. They had a mindset that got them better. When I'd work with the children, the parents would say, wow, their grades have improved because they became more disciplined. So they learned to discipline their body and their mind, okay, through the exercise of learning self-defense. Now, that's not to say that you could go to some other country and they're going to turn it into something else. I've never seen it. Okay, not in the U.S. anyway, in any school I've ever been in. Okay, so you need to just use your own eyes and ears and go look at something and see what you need to do. Okay, because I think in this dangerous world, you need to know something that's under the heading martial art. You need to know how to defend yourself, whether with your hands or with something else, because we're not in a safe place. All right? Oh, but then you're not trusting Yah. You don't read the book? He allows a lot of stuff to happen to people in the process of him eventually getting you where you need to go. Read Paul's story. He had a lot of fun. He was like, that boy was constantly being beat up. All right? But you can learn to defend yourself. All right, go ahead.
Okay, can you comment on people wearing cross?
Yeah, no, I think the cross needs to go. Okay, I wouldn't wear a cross. That is very clearly and very specifically linked to things that were used for Tammuz, etc. Okay? So no, I would not wear the cross.
Through my window, I see a big cross on top of the mountain.
Oh yeah, they got a huge one right up here. Somebody told me that they have an acetylene torch, they could fix that right away. One of our teenagers is a welder. He says, I got a torch, take that right down.
I have a question on chapter 7, verse 10.
Yep.
It's talk about, okay, let me read it. But repaying those who hate him to their face, to destroy them, he does not delay to do so. With him who hates him, he replays him to his face. It talks about hate him. Can you define what this means by hate him? And also, does it relate to the Christian or the classic? They don't perceive Torah as important commandment, and they ignore or throw away. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are those that are, and again, I don't have the Hebrew in front of me to really get the underlying idea of what the Hebrew is really trying to say there. But the idea of hate is being used in many different ways in Scripture. Here is maybe a little different. I mean, Yeshua even says, if you don't hate father and mother, sister and brother, where he really means love less by comparison. But here I think he's talking about you're repaying those that are actively working against me, or actively rejecting and causing my people to stumble. In other words, people that are interfering with what I'm doing, trying to put, a restriction on or to undermine or to redirect what I'm trying to do. Those people are a problem. He says, and I will repay them. But these are people that, of course, he's saying, know who I am and what I'm doing. They're doing it actively. They're actively trying to cause harm to what he's trying to do. Okay, so I think he's labeling that as hate me. Okay?
So
Yeah, just hold on to it till we finish, I guess.
So you're talking about those Christian or Roman Catholic, they think that, Torah is no longer be applicable to us because...
No. I'm not talking about those that are caught up in the Christian mindset, delusion, whatever, where they've been taught and they've received that the law has been done away with. And a lot of them are actively working against, but they're doing it because they've inherited a lie. These are people that are aware that Yahweh brought these people out of Egypt, that he is who he is, and they are who they are. This is not so this is people that are, eyes have been opened, and they know what they're dealing with, and they're actively attacking. It also could be the people that were behind the system that has the people in the mindset, who are actively trying to perpetuate these attacks on the truth. But I wouldn't say that this is something that Christians need to worry about, saying, oh, that he's going to, actively not delay to destroy them and repay them to their face. They think these are the people that are, Lord, Lord, we did all this stuff in your name. They think they're doing, Yeshua also says there'll be those that think they're doing God's will, but they're going to be killing you. Okay, so they're not thinking that they're actually undermining anything. He's talking about those that are actively trying to undermine. He says, those who should know better. He says, you guys don't think that I'm not going to just repay you right to your face, and it'll be quick. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, you can just hand the mic to who's next. Anders? Mark, did you have another question, or you're just still sitting up in the front? Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. You're often talking about, in Revelation 21, about how it's talking about the boot of Elohim is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them and be their Elohim.
Yes.
Yes, I noticed in chapter 3 and verse 22, do not fear them, for Yahweh your Elohim himself fights for you. And also in chapter 4, verse 35, you have been shown it to know that Yahweh himself is Elohim, there is no one besides him. And in 39, and you shall know today and shall recall to your heart that Yahweh himself is Elohim in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. And I've always been struggling with Isaiah. He's always saying that there is none else but me. But if he's now referring back to this part in the Torah, he's referring to he himself. Is the Father who he's referring to here? Yeah.
Okay, so let's understand, and this is a good question, and I think I at least I made every attempt to address this in the Father and the Son teaching, okay? And this is a very good point that Anders is bringing up if you've never heard it before, because this is the primary reason that people transition from Christianity into this and straight into Judaism. Because they can't answer that question. When it says, well, he says there's none else. There's only one, right? And then Isaiah, it's basically in a lot of the odd-numbered chapters, starting around 41 or so, Isaiah says these kind of things too. Okay, like in 41, he says, in verse 14, do not fear, you worm Yaakov, you men of Israel, I shall help you because Yahweh, your Redeemer, the set-apart one. So he's the Redeemer. Okay, so then we wonder, okay, where does Yeshua fill into that? In chapter 43, he says, I am Yahweh, verse 11, besides me there's no Savior. So he's the only Savior. Chapter 45, verse 5, I am Yahweh, there's none else. Seems like every odd chapter, right? I am Yahweh, there's none else. There's no Elohim besides me. I gird you, though you have not known me. Okay, so, we see these things playing out, and they're very consistent then to what you see in Deuteronomy, so I understand how that could be a problem. But remember, Yeshua is trying to make the point, and that's what I tried to make in the Father and Son teachings, that the Father, having not been here and not actively interacting with man, look, when I talked to my children when they were really little, they couldn't have an understanding about God or Yahweh. They needed to have a fear of me. But they also had to have a trust of me. I was God. I provided, I protected, I kept them safe, right? Essentially in that role. And then I could introduce them that there's a higher. Okay? And just like I am their father, I have a father. And so Yeshua was like a father to them in the Old Testament, but then he comes to show them that he has a father, and that father is behind all of this. So when you read some of these things, okay, so like in chapter 3, when it says that it is Yahweh himself who fights for you, well, Yahweh himself was not standing there on the battlefield knocking anybody around, but he was guiding, leading, and protecting through whatever means he normally would use, okay? Look, when he destroyed Egypt, he didn't just show up down there and start destroying it. He sent plagues, he used locusts, he used hail, he used different things to fulfill what he said he would do. But he himself made sure that it was being done. But when we understand this is with the people, these people were coming out of total polytheistic paganism. And he's trying to say, look, you need to now focus just on one, just on me. That's all you need to know. Because even knowing me, you know the Father anyway. So I don't need to confuse you with two and you don't know what to do. Because that's what happens to us now. We have two, we don't know what to do. So it takes a lot for us to try to relearn that we're focusing on the Father. That the Son was here to instruct us about the Father, ultimately from Genesis all the way to the end. And so in the teaching that I do, and maybe we'll just do it real quickly for those of you who've never heard this, my delusion and my thought is that at the beginning, before there was time, not in the beginning of time, but before there was even time, that John 1:1, in the beginning there were two beings. The Father, there was Elohim that was made up of the Word and the Father, essentially, because then we know the Word puts on flesh, becomes the Son. Okay. And so my thought was that the Son and the Father had a conversation, because he says that the Lamb was slain even before the foundation of the earth. So there was this before all of that. So my thought is that there's a conversation happening where maybe the Son says something along the lines of, hey, I'd like to make something. I want to create something. That's sort of, we're human beings made in their image, and we like to make things. We like to create things. What's the first thing you see kids doing? They're drawing stuff for us, and they're making things for us, and they're building things for us. We can't help that. We put us in a pile of dirt, we start making it into something. Put us in a pile of sand, right? Give us a bunch of wood, we start making it into something. And so I can see that conversation, and of course then the Father, who knows the end from the beginning, says, well, if you do that, then you know that this is what's going to happen, and this is how it's going to play out, and then you're going to have to do this, and I have to be willing to let you, because it says that the Father was willing to allow his Son to offer of himself, right? He gave his only begotten Son. And so we have all these things playing out before they start, which is why Yeshua knew from the beginning where it was going to end ultimately. Not just in the flesh life, but then we'd end up back at the right hand and things would be back. He says, bring me back to the esteem. We read that yesterday, right? The esteem where I was before all of this mess started. Because that was the plan all along. And so we also know that there's a thing called Tameh and Tahor, which is the protocols of interaction with our Creator. And you cannot interact in a state of Tameh in a direct way. When he had a presence sitting over the mercy seat, you could not go into that presence in a state of Tameh. But apparently the Son, which we see starting in Genesis 2, has a different level of, I don't know, you want to call it the fader switch, like on a light switch, he can turn it down enough that he can be here and interact with us and not kill everybody. I don't think the Father has that level of switch. Okay, that's why he doesn't show up to Revelation 21. He's also here at the very beginning before any human beings and animals and everything else exists. I think that's why in chapter 1 you see, and Elohim did this and Elohim did that. It doesn't mention Yahweh at all. Yahweh doesn't first get mentioned until chapter 2. Because now and it's not just Yahweh, it's Yahweh Elohim. So now you know it's a member of that Elohim known as Yahweh. And that's the one that now takes over for the rest of the story till we get to Revelation 20 and it ends. And then they both show up in 21. So it's almost like the Father said, okay, Son, I helped you get started. It's all yours. Do your thing. It's your project. But you also have the Father involved at times, because you have Yahweh on earth calling down fire and brimstone from Yahweh in heaven. Apparently they have the same name. How strange. Well, wait a minute. My son has the same name as me too. Oh, it's a common thing for people to have the same name, or beings to have the same name. All right? Just ask George Foreman. Every one of his kids' name is George. He's got like 5 sons all named George. It's crazy. Why would you do that to your kid? Well, they go, I guess, by their middle names. I don't know. It's easier when you want to call them to dinner. George! 5 kids come running. But I think that's, where we have that connection. So if you look at Isaiah 43, I am Yahweh and there is no Savior but me. Yeah, if you can't figure that out and make sense of it, you need to throw that New Testament out, and Yeshua can't be Messiah. The only way he can be Messiah if he is the Yahweh in Isaiah 43. But we have all these verses that tell us in the New Testament that he is the one of Isaiah 43. When John 1 says, everything came to be that came to be, not a thing was made that wasn't made by and through him. So he's making a claim. I'm the guy from Isaiah 43. I'm the guy from Deuteronomy chapter 3. And then Yeshua says, I want to show you more. I want to show you where I get everything from. I'm ready to pass this thing that I've been working with for 4,000 years on. Show you that there's a Father. You believe it or you don't. If you don't, you end up in Judaism. Okay? There's no other way to do it. Because it very clearly does say in a Peshat level, he says, and on earth and beneath, and he says, there's none else. I'm Yahweh. He says, Yahweh himself. In the heavens above and on the earth beneath, he says, there's none else. He says, you shall know today that, and shall recall to your heart. But I believe that almost everywhere you see Yahweh mentioned, it's the Son. I don't think that's disrespectful to the Father. I don't think that's idolatry. See, Jewish people would think that that's idolatry. You're now claiming that something other than the Father is the Father. No. Because I think the story plays out much more complex-wise in terms of there being two and how this all played out. And I think the key, if they would understand it, is the laws of Tameh and Tahor. I don't think that where there's sin or death, that's what Tameh and Tahor is about. If you're in a state where you've come into contact with sin or death, if you've either sinned or come into contact with something that's like a dead body or a dead animal or something with death, or something that even connected with death, like a woman on her monthly cycle, this is connected with the loss of the egg or whatever, and the bleeding, so it's connected with death. So it puts you in a state of tameh, not because you sinned, but it's a different thing. Look, an animal dies on your property, you have to pick it up and move it. You didn't sin, but now you're unclean. And so if you're unclean, and because of those things, you cannot interact with that presence. Guess what happens by the time you get to Revelation 21? Even sin and death are thrown in a lake of fire in the end of chapter 20. The whole world, the whole universe is now Tahor. Okay, now he can show up. It just makes sense to me. If it makes sense to you, that's great. If it doesn't, then enjoy Judaism at some point. I came from there. I don't see why you'd want to go, okay? No insult to that. I understand all of the system that it's about. I watched all the hypocrisy that I saw. Look, and you can get a lot of wonderful understandings from them. They've studied this way longer than any of us have, okay? But I don't want to be a part of that system. I've seen the flaws in that system, okay? But you can still learn an awful lot from them, and we should be open sometimes to learn from them. So let's not disrespect them and knock them and attack them, okay? Because they are the oracle keepers. Because of them, the people say, oh, no, not because of them, because of Yahweh. Yeah, I understand that, but he used them, okay? So because of them being willing to be martyred throughout the centuries and holding on to the law and the Torah and everything, so that is now available for us. If they weren't willing to go through all of that, you would have nothing to read. Nothing to study, nothing to learn. Oh yeah, Yahweh could have done it with somebody else, but he didn't. He did it with them. And he tells us that, by the way, in Genesis, that they would be the ones with the scepter. They would be the ones with a law teacher coming forth from. They had that role. He knew the end from the beginning. He knew they would be the ones that would do it. That they would have enough passion to recognize and embrace being his people, that they would be willing to die for it over and over and over and over. Not a lot of people would do that. Okay? And so that's an important distinction. Okay, so good question. Hopefully that answered it. I don't know. Did it give you somewhat of an answer? Okay, good. I also explained it, I said, in the Father and the Son teaching. Okay, Kathy. And you can just take the mic out of the stand. Just pull it out, it comes right out.
Thank you, Rabbi. You were talking about things in the world, entertainment. Okay, so I've always had a problem with that. So it may just be my personal problem. And it's a distraction for me. And frankly, I'm a little long in tooth, and I have a very short period of time, unless Yah wants me to live to 100, but I've got a lot to learn and unlearn. And all of these things are distractions. And yeah, so I watched Harry Potter, and I started watching it, and I could see, and I was still kind of in and out of Christianity and trying Torah too. But so I guess my question is, what honors Yah for us to entertain ourselves? And, and I don't want to be real rigid and pious and, okay. He is our entertainment. He is our joy. We're here at Sukkot. So he is our jewels and our joy. So what are we doing over here with this? And what, does everyone just...
Do you listen to music?
Yes.
There's no music here. I mean, I know the Psalms are written to be music, but...
Mm-hmm.
So we create music that we think somehow makes sense and honors him, maybe. I'm just saying that we're left to certain amounts of creativity. But let's use what Paul says is, while maybe something is allowable, doesn't mean it's profitable. Right. Okay? And so you have to discern what's profitable, even if it's allowable. And so that I'm not endorsing that everybody should run out and do any of this stuff. I said, look, you have to be discerning for yourself and for your family, period. But realize that you probably need to rein back your judgment of everybody else when you find out they're doing something. Okay? I mean, I told my wife a few years back that I'm done apologizing. Okay? Because I would want to go see the Avengers or something.
Yeah.
Okay? And then I'd be like, wanting to maybe almost go do it in secret because I was afraid to have to deal with the nonsense from the people in the congregation that were going to be like all offended that I went. I said, I'm not apologizing anymore. If I go, I go, and if I don't, I don't. And if anybody finds out, good. I'm just saying, because I am who I am. I'm on my journey. Okay? But I'm not going to give you any more grief either. I don't micromanage. I'm not going to, you do what you, I mean, there are people doing some stuff I know is absolutely wrong. And I say, look, that's your choice. I don't think you should be doing it, but it's your choice. Okay? And I don't judge that. I don't look at you like, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that's sin? But I find you guys do that to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's profitable necessarily. Because you get offended for Yahweh. Why? He can be plenty. He says he's a zealous zeal. He can take care of himself. Okay? Why do you get offended? Everybody's on their own journey. Let them have their journey. Okay?
So all this stuff, because like I originally was hacked on Facebook and Messenger, and that's a big time suck.
Yeah.
It is a huge time suck.
I agree with you. I think that if you're spending a lot of time on any of this stuff, that's bad. Okay? Because now you're spending, and that's part of where you look at idolatry. If you're giving these things more time than you're giving him, there's a balance problem. Okay? So absolutely, and that includes music, that includes even things that are healthy like exercise or, studying about health or whatever. I mean, if you're giving more time to that thing than you're giving to him, you have balance problems. Yeah. All right? I mean, if you've been a Netflix binger, you know what I'm talking about. You'll find a show that's on there and you've gone through 3 seasons in one night and your eyes are like glued, and you're, just one more episode and then I'll go to sleep. No, one more episode and you're going to work because it's already the morning. Okay, that's the problem, okay, that binging and that obsessing and that, then we get caught up in something where we are now literally, like she said, distracted to the point of not having our mindset right and losing all that time that we could have been spending more productively. Okay, that doesn't mean that I have never made anything about that. I like football. I only watch one team, and they only play so many games that I get to watch. But I know friends of mine that watch every sporting event every night, all the time, every day. If it's basketball, they're watching that. When it's hockey, they're watching that. When it's baseball, that's all they do. That's out of balance.
Yeah.
But if you choose to be entertained by a sporting event, good. So you watch some games and have it in balance, and you don't get all upset if you miss it. Although, pray for me, the Cowboys lost to the Jets. I don't know how that's possible. Okay. And I won't say anything about that bad call in the end zone. But, and in case you're wondering, I watched it last night. So it wasn't during anything since the weekend because I have a way to do that on my phone. But the thing is, it doesn't upset me like maybe it would have. And it doesn't excite me like it would have because it's in balance. I just find it entertaining. Okay? Okay, of course, there was a time when I was a fan. What does fan mean? Fanatic. Don't be a fanatic. All right? But you can find something enjoyable and entertaining, whether you can follow any kind of a sport. Some people, my mother, she loves tennis. She watches tennis. Yeah. But think about how much time it's taking in your life. So I think Kathy makes a really good point. And how important it is in your life. Okay? If you're tempted to watch something on Shabbat or on a holy day because that's when it's on and you don't have a way to record or whatever else, then you're out of balance. Nothing should be higher in importance or your desire or your mindset than doing what Yah says.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome. Thank you. I think we probably had our numbers go down by 300. We're like, oh, the rabbi watched Marvel or something? Oh, no. All right, Maureen. Wow, and I've got a long list of things you guys didn't even come close to touching on, so I might gonna have to start my list in a minute or two here. Let's see if we can get through maybe you three, and then I'll get to my list.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Here we are. We're going to talk about Deuteronomy. We talked about movies, and we talked about martial arts, and we talked about crosses and Jewish stars, and wow, we just really covered a bunch of stuff. All right, go ahead.
Deuteronomy 2:34. Could you elaborate?
Yep.
On under the ban, the meaning
Yes, I can.
of that?
That is in my list of ones to cover, so thank you. It's also mentioned in chapter 3 and verse 6. It's mentioned in lots of places, this idea of under the ban. Under the ban means to completely and utterly destroy. Okay? It doesn't mean that somebody came with yellow police tape and sort of put it around and said, do not trespass and don't touch. And no, it means to totally get rid of it. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, I have a notation in my margin here from another teaching, I guess, from years ago. I was wondering if it's accurate. The bedstead of Og, I have here length 16 feet by 7.5 foot width. Is that accurate?
I got it about 13.5 by 6, but it's big.
Okay.
It's big.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, James, coming back for a second shot.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if my thinking was right on a subject that seemed to be going again and again with different people. The whole thing about what you watch, what you have, it's more about how it influences you or those you're responsible for.
Correct.
Whether you need to remove them, abstain from watching them, abstain from drinking them. And that's one of the things that started so many issues is it worked for one person, so now they made it a rule. Everyone had to do it. Then they did it again and again and again, and that's basically what Christianity turned it into.
Okay.
And Judaism did similar things with the Talmud. Worked for one person, everyone does it.
Yeah, I can see how that could be possible. Look, I think you just gave me a good metaphor for this, which is, you're allowed to drink alcohol. Not good for everybody. Some people, it will destroy their lives. But you're allowed. Okay? So I'm just saying, use that as like just a very simple example. The alcohol itself is not the problem. But as James was talking about, but how does it affect you and your ability to do what you're supposed to do? So if you're able to have a glass of wine, which is actually fairly healthy for you, on an occasion, that's probably not a problem. If when you open up a beer, you end up looking over and noticing you finished the entire six-pack yourself, that might be a problem. Okay? Or if you finished the whole bottle at one sitting and you weren't with anybody else. Okay? I mean, these are the kinds of things that you have to be able to monitor so that you have the right balance. Now, that's to say that everybody's personality is different. Everybody's issues is different. Okay, I would never have a thought to drink more than one beer. I have trouble finishing one. It's not my thing. I don't love it. I may have one occasionally and socially with some people, but there's never going to be a thought for me to have 2, let alone 6. All right? And it's nothing that is as a moral thing. I just would have no interest, okay? Same thing with a glass of wine. I said, give me a little bit. I'm not going to finish the whole glass. But some of you easily could polish off a glass, and that could be just fine. But some of you are going to finish off a whole bottle, that's not fine. So you could take that into any area of things that are allowed, but not necessarily profitable. Okay? And what makes them not profitable generally is how they're used. Okay? So hopefully, does that make sense mostly for everybody? All right. All right. Raymond. It's on.
Right. And just as a heads up, for Shauna's sake, when it's her turn, she asked if I could raise this up for her so that she didn't want to have to hold it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We can raise it for you.
I can take care of it, but I just wanted to explain before I did it.
That's fine.
All right. Okay, so one thing that I know is very common to struggle with, almost everybody bumps into it from, at one point or another, but usually when we're fresh, and that is, to get really excited about how wonderful all of this new, different understanding is. And you can run into that thing of how knowledge puffs up. And one thing that I've always found helpful with that, and that I know that has helped a lot of other people get through that, we just went through today in chapter 7, verse 7, where we're being reminded, we didn't get chosen because we were greater than any other people. It reminds us, you're the least of all peoples. And there's a whole lot more going on there, but, there's one of the connections that I think of when I read that is in 1 Corinthians 1:26, where it says, "For look at your calling, brothers, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble, but Elohim has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and Elohim has chosen the weak of the world to put to shame the strong, and Elohim has chosen the lowborn of the world and the despised and the ones that are nothing, that he might bring to nothing the ones that think they're something, so that no flesh should boast in his presence." And I've always found that very helpful to think about the fact that
it's okay.
I'm not here. I'm not here because I'm better than everybody else. We're not here because we're better than everybody else. We're here because we needed more help than anybody else. We get the head start because we needed that. It's his beautiful plan so that the things that would have been on the bottom of the pile end up on the top. What better shows the work of a master? I mean, any decent craftsman can make something with really, really good material. But he's going to show his mastery by making his masterwork out of the worst material in the pile. And I've always found that very helpful to keep myself in line.
Amen. Well said. Appreciate that.
Hi.
Hi.
Chapter 16, verse 13.
Chapter 16?
I mean 6, pardon
okay.
me.
I was going to say, wow, we didn't get that far today.
Fear
Okay.
Yahweh, your Elohim, and serve him and fear and swear by his name. I believe there's a verse in the New Testament that says we're not to swear by his name. Could you just comment on that, please?
Well, look, he's saying, again, well, in the New Testament, it's telling let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. It says, and don't go ahead and just be, they were at the context of the time, they were in the habit of just swearing everything as like, as Yahweh lives, or as the temple stands, or, all these like assurances, and it was just getting to be this useless, frivolous, just banter out there that didn't mean anything. And she was like, you know what? Just let your yea be yea, your nay be nay. You don't need to be doing all that. Because doing that can bring you into the problem with oaths and making an oath. And he said that's just not a good thing to be doing. But here he's trying to tell them, look, this is corporate Israel about to go into the land. They weren't so much corporate Israel at the point of Yeshua. They were occupied Israel. Okay? They were not in their own sovereignty at that point. And he says, look, fear Yahweh your Elohim and serve him. And if you're going to swear, in other words, make your commitments by his authority. He says, be in line with his authority. If you're going to do something, commit to do it and do it according to his authority. So it's a culture that we maybe don't understand, a culture of swearing according to something and making these commitments according to something and taking oaths. And oaths mean a big deal to people. We don't really have that culturally anymore. So this is something that they would have understood much more clearly, okay? And so, but there's no contradiction between what he's saying here and the total disaster of what's going on by the time Yeshua is walking around. Okay? All right. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this kind of revolves back to under the band. And you said it was to utterly wipe out. Okay. Well, a lot of these nations that they dispossess, I'm sure, were deep into idolatry, not only just because they didn't allow them to cross into the land, but Yahweh was turning them over so that they could dispossess what they had, take over what they had. Well, I can't think of the passage that it connected to, but there was a time when they went in and God said, under the ban, and they saved the livestock and they saved some of their possessions.
Saul messed up. Yep.
And I was wondering, what is the difference between this correlation and Saul? Because they kept the livestock and they kept, where is it?
Well, Saul got in trouble for that. He didn't do what he was told to do.
Okay.
They didn't tell him keep the livestock at that point. Now, there are times when he's told them, look, you're going to go through this city and you're not going to touch anything. And you go into the city and you're going to just do this. So he doesn't always put everything under the ban. But when he tells you to, you're supposed to put it all under the ban. And then, of course, you have Samuel showing up going, why do I hear bleating of sheep? What's going on here? I thought you were told to put everything under the ban. But you held things back. And that's what we end up with Haman in the book of Esther. Okay, because it was not actually put, under the ban in Saul's day. And so we have the Agagite line continue until we get Haman. And so that, you see, is one of the results of that failure that Saul had. Of course, Yah knew that was going to happen. And so this is all part of this playing things through as we need them. All right. So we have a little bit of time here. Lunch is at 12. It's about 11:30. I have a lot of things I want to shotgun through here because there was so much stuff in these chapters that we didn't even get to touch on. All right. So first, I want to go to chapter 1. And I really love pointing out in verse 6 as well as chapter 2 and verse 3, this whole idea of, Yah having to tell them, listen, you dwelt here long enough. You've been going around this mountain long enough, is in chapter 2. And in chapter 1, he says, you've dwelt here long enough. Some of you have gotten stuck in a spot. He said, okay, you've dwelt here long enough. Some of you are in the spot of gathering information but not doing. And that's what he's basically saying. You've been here, you've been getting information, you've been around the mountain. No, now it's time to go do it. Go out there and do it. Don't just stand here at the mountain. Okay? You have to go out and do this stuff. So I like those verses right there. Then in verse 8 in chapter 1, it's an important thing. He says, look, this is your life, by the way, in metaphor. What did Yeshua tell us about everything in the Bible? It says everything was taught to them in parables. That doesn't mean the stuff didn't literally happen. It meant that you're not supposed to just only get the literal out of it. Look for the lesson in the story as you would with a parable. Because Yeshua said he only spoke to them always in parables, and he continued to do so when he walked in the flesh. Always in parables. So here you have in verse 8, he says, see, I've set the land before you, go in and possess. So I've laid before you life and death, Moses tells us, choose life. But you have to actually go in and take possession. Own it. Make it part of you. It's yours now. Not yours to do whatever you want, but yours to do the way Yah said. Because when they went into the land and did what they wanted with it, they got thrown out of the land. So got to be careful when you think about this possessing thing. All right? We'll get the demons in. Don't get possessed. Okay. You guys laugh a little. It's okay. All right. But you have to go in and take ownership. But you got to be careful of that ownership. See, some of you have experienced this or you've in your own life, or you've watched people do it. They'll start attending a congregation about 1.5 years, 2 years in, or whatever time frame it takes. All of a sudden, they've decided this is my congregation. This is where I'm going to be going. And now, all of a sudden, they want their say to have influence. Because after all, it's my congregation now. So I should have a say in it. When I was just visiting and not sure if I was going to stay and stick with it, I was allowing it to be what it is. That's a husband-wife thing, too. You guys are dating, everything's great, then all of a sudden you take possession. Okay, now we got to make some changes. I own you now. You're mine. I get to make changes. We got to be really careful with that. He says here, we got the metaphor of the land. I set the land before you, go in and possess it, but you can only do with it what I've taught you to do with it. If you don't, you're going to lose it. Well, he's offering the same thing with the plan of salvation and eternal life. Go in and possess it. Do what he's told you to do with it, and you'll end up with all the things he's promised you it will bring. The land would not yield its fruit if you didn't treat it the way he told you to treat it. If you did, it would always yield its fruit. Everybody would be blessed. Everybody would be safe. It's a metaphor for all the things. It's a parable of life for us. You have to first recognize it. It's set before you. He said, I set the land before you. I've laid it out for you to see. Salvation, Torah observance, reward, eternal life. I've laid it out before you. He says, now, it's yours now. Take it. But you can't just do what you want with it. Okay? Let's see. I got some more notes here. Just got to see why I wrote the verses down. Okay, verse 43 of chapter 1, verse 43. So I spoke to you, but you would not listen and rebelled against the mouth of Yahweh, which is another thing that Yeshua is referred to as the voice, the mouth, the spokesperson. Okay? But you rebelled against what Yahweh has said, which of course breaks the covenanting idea. He said, but this is what you did. You acted proudly. Okay, that's the big problem, that pride issue of I know better, I'm going to do what I want, you're not going to tell me what to do, blah, 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 blah. You see, it's always that sovereignty issue. But see, they had not trusted him enough to submit themselves. They were still self-sovereign. I'm going to jump back actually to verse 36. I don't know why I have this out of order in my notes. You know why? Because every year when we do this, I add to my notes. I'm literally doing what you're doing, and I always add more stuff. And I've added like 3 things just today. Okay, this isn't one of them. This is from another time. But in verse 36, it talks about Caleb. What did he do? It says he followed Yahweh completely. In other words, with integrity. He didn't do it perfectly. He's not like, look, somebody did it perfectly. No, he didn't. But he did it with integrity, okay? And that's really a key understanding there. All right, let's see. Verse 13, I guess we're going to go backwards. This is something I wrote down today. I want you to notice, he says to the people, choose men wise and understanding and known to your tribes. He says, so in other words, let the people be comfortable with who is chosen. He says, he said, let me appoint them. Appointing still comes from the authority. The appointed does the appointing. Okay, the anointed appointed does the anointing and the appointing. Well, maybe not always the anointing, because maybe Yah anointed some people with gifts, and then the appointed one then notices those gifts, recognizes them, and then appoints them. Okay? But notice he says, you get to choose, but I appoint. I'm the leader, I appoint. That's what he's telling them. But then again, in leadership, we do the same thing. We're looking to recognize people with gifts so that when we put them in front of you as an elder or as a shamash, or a zaken. Zaken is elder and shamash is like a deacon. That none of you are going to look at me like, what? Really? You're all going to look like, it's about time. Because you'll have already seen those people doing those things. So that's kind of what's going on here. Now, of course, part of this also is Moses doesn't know these people like they do. So he's saying, look, you pick the respected people in your tribes, the ones who you feel are wise and have understanding, that are known, have a positive reputation, and then I'll appoint them. Okay, that's an important sort of process there. In verse 21, it talks about that whole possessing thing again, but it wants you to do it this way. He says, go up and possess it. He says, but do it without fear and don't be discouraged. This is our biggest problem, our battle with fear and discouragement. Many of you call me up in council because you've been doing this and it's somehow blown up in your face a little bit, even though it had been working for a while, and you get discouraged. Why am I not seeing more fruit? Why is my life still miserable? Well, because like Raymond said, because he took you off the bottom of the pile. You got a lot to work on. So it doesn't fix so quick. All right? We're going to talk more about that in my teachings this week. The Up to the Challenge teachings. All right? Let's see, verse 30 and 30 through 32. You can see the trust issues. He says, Yahweh Elohim, who is going before you, he does fight for you according to all he did for you in Egypt and Mitzrayim, right before your eyes. And in the wilderness, where you saw how Yahweh Elohim had borne you as a man bears his son. There's the verse I was talking about. He's giving you the metaphor. It's not literal, but as a man bears his son. He was like a father to them. Okay? And in all the way that you went until you came to this place, yet, you see, he says, in spite of all that, and you should be able to look in your own lives and see something similar in your life that is that impressive, and be careful of the yet in verse 32. Yet in this matter, right, your life is chugging along, he's done all these amazing things, and then something pops up, and in that matter, you're not putting your trust in Yahweh. He says, yet in this matter, you're putting no trust in Yahweh. You saw all this stuff he did. He did all these things for you. And now all of a sudden you're not trusting again. That's the whole book is about, can you develop a trust of your Creator? Can you trust him? And everybody we know in our lives has been untrustworthy. How is that? How do you possibly do that? We've had breach of trust as like a routinely experienced nightmare. I mean, breach of trust is always happening. And now he says, trust me. Okay. That's really tough. Chapter 2 and verse, let's see. We'll skip that. We'll go to verse 30 real quickly. In chapter 2, verse 30, what does it say here? At the end of the verse it says, for Yahweh your Elohim hardened his spirit and strengthened his heart. That's what it talks about when you see with Pharaoh. Hardening his spirit. What does spirit mean? Intrinsic nature. In other words, he gave him strength to do what they already wanted to do. So when it says that Pharaoh was like, well, I want to let them go now, and it says then Yahweh hardened his heart. No, he really didn't want to let them go. He was panicking for a second. But Yahweh wasn't done, so he strengthened him in the direction he already wanted to go so he could finish what he was doing with that whole situation in Mitzrayim. Okay? So here it's actually worded more clearly that he hardened his spirit and strengthened his heart. He said, but Sihon, the sovereign of Heshbon, would not let us pass because Yahweh had given him more strength of courage to finish the process as it was going to be. Because Sihon didn't want to let him go, but he had a little panicky moment. Okay? Let's see, the whole enraged with me for your sake thing that goes on in chapter 3:26, 4:21. It's actually in chapter 1 and verse 37, this idea of Yahweh being enraged. He said he was enraged with me for your sake. So what does that mean? He was saying, look, you're asking me to go against what I said. And that's something that Yahweh said, it enraged him, so to speak, as a metaphor for us, as we would understand it in the flesh, for the people's sake. Because had Moses convinced Yahweh to change on all this, then the people would have nothing to really hold their anchor on. Because after all, Yahweh changes so easily. Yahweh said to Moses, I've made a decision. You're not going in. Oh, but what about the discussion with Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, that's where he was testing Abraham. And yet, you notice when he got down to the number he was satisfied with, he stopped the conversation. Okay, we don't actually see the way it's worded there, but all of a sudden, Abraham stopped asking. He said, and when it was done, Yahweh just moved on. It was over. Same thing when Moses says, oh, don't kill all these people. Because Yahweh says, why don't I just wipe them all out and start again with you? He wasn't really planning to. He was testing Moses. So you have to understand the context of what's really going on. Who's talking, who's he talking to, why are they having the conversation, what's really happening. Okay? But why was he enraged with Moses? Because Moses was saying, well, you know, I'm looking over the mountains over there. That land looks pretty good. Come on, can't I just go over there? And Yahweh's like, we are not talking about this again. That's actually the real, he said, enough of that. I love the way that's worded. In chapter 3, where was it? 26. He says, enough of that. Speak no more to me about this. He's like, oh, no. Don't ask me to change a judgment. I made a judgment. Okay, I'm Yahweh. I don't change. Okay, so I think that was important. Man, there's so much here. How much time I've got? Not much. Okay, so I want to cover something that I have time, hopefully I have time for. In the Ten Commandments, it talks about Shabbat, and I want to just cover something because somebody asked me about this, and I mentioned it last feast. I didn't mention it this feast, but I think it's bearing, it's worth saying. And after all, I still haven't gotten everybody to turn off online, so there's more things I could do to disturb everybody, so let's do it. Well, I'm not following those guys anymore. Can you believe what Rabbi just said? Okay. All right. Some of you asked really good questions, and I think you should have asked those questions like, aren't those people in the cafeteria working for us, or aren't we doing business, and how are we eating, and it's a holy day or Shabbat, and what's going on? Anybody have that thought? If you didn't, that's good, I guess, but most of you raised your hands. Look, the leadership had to deal with this question. It's a very important question. It's a challenging question. Let's understand, when we're trying to understand a Torah command, we need to understand it in the fullness of application, not just the fullness of context, the fullness of application. So some of you would think, well, wait a minute. We went to the cafeteria, and there were people working and serving, and we're paying to stay here, so aren't we doing something wrong? That's a good question. Okay, so are you doing something wrong when you're watching the live stream and using electricity and internet on Shabbat? Are you doing something wrong when you're living in your house that you pay for monthly? Are you living something? Do you understand? Where do we apply this and how do we apply this? You can see where it becomes really problematic. Because most of you don't own your house outright. You're renting or paying a mortgage. And so do you just not live there on the day that you're on Saturdays? And do you turn off your electricity and your air conditioning and your heat? So how do you handle this? So the leadership really, worked diligently to try to prayerfully consider this, and this is what we believe we were inspired with. There's two simple issues that I think address this. In Deuteronomy chapter 5 in the Ten Commandments, it says, in commandment number 5, it says, on the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest. You do not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, etc. Okay, now, bear in mind that it says, your servant. What does that mean? In those days, that meant somebody that lived in your house, on your property, that you were fully responsible for. They depended on you for everything. They were fully under your authority. Whatever you said, they had to do. Is that the case here on the property? No. Is that the case with the people at the power company? No. They're not. So first, let's establish that these are not male servants and maid servants, as is talking about in the commandment. These people work for other entities, not you. Okay? On this property, everybody works for Ridgecrest. They don't work for MTOI. Okay, we're a customer. We're not the boss. Okay, now, that doesn't fix everything or anything, and we're just building a little kind of piece here, piece of the puzzle. Now, the second thing is the idea that we understood, because we know that you're not supposed to do business on Shabbat. Nehemiah tells them, I'm going to shut the gates, I'm going to lock you guys out, we're not doing business. So then we were inspired with the idea of understanding the difference between active commerce and passive commerce. And we believe that Torah tells you not to do active commerce. Active commerce is that a reasonable person watching you doing what you're doing would see you doing business. Like, in other words, exchanging, doing business at that moment. So if you walked into a store on a holy day or on Shabbat, or if you were at a restaurant on Shabbat, an average, normal, reasonable person would assume you're spending money and eating and buying and paying for that thing that day. Because somebody said, well, what if I got a Groupon? I paid for it in advance. Doesn't matter. The person in the restaurant doesn't know that. The reasonable person is going to see you looking like you're doing business on Shabbat. Now, when you stay at a hotel and you're there and you show up on Friday and you're leaving on Sunday because you're doing something for the weekend for some reason somewhere, do you leave on Saturday and not be there because you're paying for Saturday? No. A reasonable person does not assume you're paying that day for that day. They don't know how many days you're staying there. Nobody assumes you're just staying there that day. Unless they see you at the front desk on Saturday exchanging business, seeing you in the hotel, nobody's really thinking you're doing business that day. When you're living in your house and you're paying rent or apartment or mortgage, nobody thinks you're running to the mortgage company on Saturday and making a payment. You pay the power company monthly. Nobody thinks you're paying just on Saturday every day for each day. We call this passive commerce. We agreed? We understand. Okay. When you go to the hotel, hotels often offer you free breakfast. It's not really free. It was built into the price of the hotel, but we understand that. Okay, before free breakfast, hotels were $25 cheaper a night. But now you get free breakfast and free internet, which isn't free. But you're not buying that meal that time. You're not going and exchanging any business. Nobody thinks you're sitting there at breakfast doing business. Now, if you were at IHOP, they might. Okay? If you're at a restaurant, oh yeah, they're going to think you're doing business. But at the hotel's free breakfast? Now, of course, if you're at a hotel that doesn't have free breakfast and you're in a restaurant getting breakfast, that's different. But if the hotel has a free breakfast, nobody thinks you're doing business. Because you're not doing active commerce at that moment. Okay? So, on this property, everything that's happening meals-wise is passive commerce. Actually, your rooms, did you leave your room on Saturday and just not stay in it? Because it would be the same thing. See, let's not be hypocrites. If you're having a problem with people, doing whatever, and you're eating on Shabbat, why don't you have a problem with the fact that you are also, I see the thing flashing, lunch in 10 minutes. Okay? Somebody's hungry behind the video board. All right. So you're paying for your room for each night, and you're here for 10 or 9 nights. You're here for 9 nights, whatever it is. But you're not going to leave your room and not be in it because, after all, it's Shabbat. I can't pay for it. It's passive. You're paying for a package of time. Okay? And so everything that's happening here fits into that category. We have paid for room and food as a package. It's inclusive from when we got here Sunday afternoon, from that dinner, all the way till we are done with dinner on Monday next week, right? And so it's all included in that. And the people working here, they are not your manservant or maidservant. They do not work for us. We would do it ourselves, but they won't let us. So that's what it is. Now, you don't have to participate in all that. You can figure out a way to make your own stuff somewhere off property and do what you have to do. But you'd have to stay off property because you can't do it here because they won't let us. But just realize that if you have a problem with A, are you consistent in applying it everywhere in your life? Now, there are Karaites out there that will turn off their electricity and turn off everything. But you know what? I'm sure that nobody's ever challenged them about moving out of their house that they're paying for mortgage or rent on. Because they think, well, I'm going to just turn off the electricity. Oh, but you're paying for the place itself. Okay? Well, they'll say, well, we're not making somebody work at the electric company. Well, you're not. They don't work for you. They work for somebody else. They're working because somebody else is paying them. And they were hired by somebody else. Does that all make sense? Okay? So I just wanted to cover that. Any questions about that particular thing? Okay, Norma? Wait here. He'll give you the mic. And all the live streamers are like, but I never got to any of your questions. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, precisely. I sat there because I have that question about Shabbat. I don't have children under my care in my home, but I'm the authority of the home because it's my house, but I have my father living with me. He goes on services to his church on Shabbat, but they don't honor Shabbat, the 24 hours plus. So I tried to teach him a little bit about what is observing Shabbat, and he stopped working, but he still doesn't get it completely. So do I have any authority on him?
No.
He's my father.
No. I mean, you can give him counsel and advice and, and input like you're doing, but really he's going to do what he's going to do, and that's okay. What you need to do is guard it for yourself, all right? Because he's your father, okay? All right, can you squeeze some of those in very quickly from the live stream?
Okay, from Amy Pernack, it says Deuteronomy 6:17, what was his witnesses? She's wanting to know, are they related to the two witnesses in Revelation?
Okay, no. This witnesses has to do with the actual events. The entirety of the scriptures accounts is the witnesses. In other words, these things witness of the events of what happened. So he wants them to guard. That's why he's giving them this whole story. He says, you need to guard over the story of the events, the accounts of what happened. Okay? These are all the four Gospels are the witnesses of Yeshua. Okay? All right, next question. So witnesses here is not talking about people.
Okay, from Sean and Anna Sarah Richard, it says, question, if a person had writings from another religion, would it be considered an idol? If so, would we need to burn the books or just throw them away in the garbage?
No. Look, I have probably almost everything but a Koran on my bookshelf. Because somebody may ask me something, I want to see if it actually says it. And so if somebody gave me a Book of Mormon one time, I have that. I've got 15 different translations of scriptures. Some of them are awful. I've got a bunch of the Adventist writings because somebody gave me that. I mean, I don't have a problem with you having almost anything as a reference material. Now, if you start using it like you use your scriptures, that's a whole different problem. And bear in mind, almost all the ones I just told you, I've never opened, I've never needed to. But I had them and kept them just in case I had needed to understand what a person was claiming that. Because most of the time, let's put it this way. Here's a really cool thing that I'm going to say. Can we all agree that most people misquote what's in their scriptures? That being said, do you think it's possible when someone's quoting their thing that they may be misquoting it? I mean, absolutely, right? So if they're going to claim, well, Ellen White said, or the Quran said, or the Book of Mormon said, I wouldn't mind having one to look that up and go, let me just see if it actually says that. I've got now a complete book. By the way, those people out there that said they've read the Talmud? I'll take them to my office and they can show me which one of the 73 volumes they read. 73. Oh, Rabbi, you going into that now? No, but now when someone wants to quote it, I can look it up. Okay? You see what I'm saying? So no, I don't have a problem if you have other materials. It depends on why you have it. All right? I have it for the reason of if somebody wants to claim something and argue with me about something from their source, it's a little helpful if I can look it up myself and see if it actually says it. Because I know people misquote the scriptures from the Bible. Absolutely they're going to misquote things from their books. There's no doubt. Because we're not misquoting it because it's the scriptures. We're misquoting it because we're people. And they're people too, so they're probably going to misquote. Does it make sense? All right. Next question.
From Dolores Stone, so Deuteronomy 5:9-10. Do we end generational curse by doing the verse 10?
Okay, look, the generational cursing is sort of a Christianized idea. It's mostly the generational curse is that Abba is not going to poke and disturb the peace. He's going to let you just have it generationally imitated up to a point. Okay, because all the generational curse is your foolishness into somebody before you being imitated by the next person before you until eventually you could imitate the same dumb stuff. Oh, my grandfather was an alcoholic, and then my father was an alcoholic, and now I'm an alcoholic. All right? Well, one of you somewhere along the line needs to say, it stops with me, and then the next person is not the child of an alcoholic, and then they can now have broken that curse. It's not that, see, we're still coming out of this spiritualized voodoo thing. He cursed them. The generational stuff is that people do dumb stuff and then it gets imitated generationally. And that's, and he says, look, you want to act dumb? It's going to be, visiting upon fathers and down a bunch of generations. And then at some point I might inspire somebody to knock it off. Okay? But I'm going to allow it to go for a while so that you need to know what you're doing could curse future generations because they will imitate you. Hopefully that answers it. Anybody else? We're good? Okay, do you have the mic still? Okay, I'm going to have you close this up. Okay, so Rob's going to go ahead and close us in prayer, and we are just 2 minutes to 12, so we're doing good.
All right. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for our Rabbi, thank you for this opportunity to come together as a body, as our family here to read your word as we are commanded to on this Sukkot. Father, as we go out through our day activities today, keep us all safe. And thank you for all that you've done for us so far. In Yeshua's name and authority, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I just saw something cool I didn't mention that you need to hear. In 5:26, it says, this is related to what we said yesterday. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living Elohim speaking from the midst of the fire as we have and does live? Hearing Yah's voice kills your flesh. Different way of looking at it. They're thinking, I can't hear it because you're killing my flesh. Not literally like killing me and I'm going to drop dead. The flesh doesn't want to die. So he said, when he was giving them the commandments and they freaked out, they said, we can't do this. It says, if we hear, he says, for who is there that can hear this, all right, of the whole flesh, though. He didn't say people. He said, who of all flesh can hear this and not die? And Yah said, this is why he says in verse 29, that they would have such a heart in them to fear me. That's only 3 verses later. He said they gave in to the flesh. So remember that. Hearing Yah's word kills all flesh. If you would shema, though, not just hear it like I heard it went in my ear. Shema'ing the word kills the flesh. Amen? Amen. Let's go have lunch.